Board of Supervisors. It is 10 o'clock, so we're opening the regular session of the Board of Supervisors. Please take a roll call.
Supervisor Howard.
Here.
Supervisor Starkey.
Here.
Supervisor Short.
Here.
Supervisor Borges.
Here.
Supervisor Wilson.
Here. I ask you to please take a moment of reflection. Supervisor Howard, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice.
Do we have any introduction to new employees?
Not today, Chair.
Not today. Report any actions out of closed session, County Council?
No, Chair.
Moving right along. Chair requests any deletions, corrections, additions to the board members of the agenda at this time. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must come before the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular Board of Supervisors meeting. Any such action taken or needed? Having none? We'll receive brief reports and announcements relative to the County of Del Norte programs, projects, progress, and the 2x2 committees, goal committees, and on board by staff, travel, and training reports. Supervisor Starkey, would you please lead us off?
Okay, thank you. Since the last meeting, I did fly to Florida and attend the National Association of Counties Conference. There was a lot going on, and I cannot recap it all in any kind of time, so I'll just hit the sessions that I attended, and from that I'm hoping to bring forward ideas to the board so that we could potentially enact some of those so that it was a favorable trip. I attended the Justice and Public Safety Policy Steering Committee. From that we learned a lot about artificial intelligence, a lot of the programs that are available for free to come in and assist with looking at our jails and how we can operate them. I attended the counties preparing for and recovering from natural disasters and talking about the annexes that we need to have in place prior to a disaster happening. Our staff does a great job with that. Attended the State Policy Trends, the Financial Management 101 course, where we learned about the essentials of county budgeting and financial management of elected officials. That comes at good timing because we have a potential opportunity to have ongoing budget hearings today, and so I can use some of the information I learned from that to apply to that. I attended a seminar for economic mobility, which is another avenue in our strategic plan about economic development and how NACO has some of these programs already in place. We have a template that we could use and just apply some of the proven evidence-based practices that have been used. And I attended the NACO annual business meeting and was able to watch Supervisor James Gore be sworn in as the NACO president. As you're aware, James Gore is in Sonoma County. He's a personal friend of Supervisor Howard, and I have a relationship with him as well. And it was great to see somebody from California, someone that we know, at that high-level position for us to be able to become involved. Attended a city council meeting while I was in Florida. I was able to watch that online. They did assign 2 people to a fireworks ad hoc. So them, along with the harbor, has also assigned 2 people, along with Supervisor Short and I. We are looking to nail down a meeting to be able to begin that so that we can work with the Sheriff's Department in order to, and the local law enforcement, in order to come up with strategies to avoid what happened this year, next year. I attended the Q3 Middle Mile Advisory Committee. This was very disappointing for Del Norte County. The 82 miles that had been slated for us to get the middle mile, the broadband through Del Norte County, has been reduced to 62 because there was $1.5 billion that was in the state budget that was taken out because of their budget issues. And so a lot of rural counties, a lot of areas that are the most in need of broadband, the underserved communities, were affected. And it was the first meeting since we learned that, and it was a very robust meeting. I don't think that will be the end of it. I met with the Veteran Service Officer to discuss the Operation Greenlight for Veterans. It's another NACO program where we highlight and we support our veterans during the week before Veterans Day with lighting up your town in green. And so I'm working hopefully with building maintenance to get some costs associated with how we could light up at least county buildings. And I will bring that back along with the resolutions to see if the board would be willing to support that. I attended several 4th of July wrap-up meetings, lots of discussions with regards to the incident that happened on South Beach, but a lot of positive things that happened with the sanctioned events or the planned family events that happened at Beachfront Park, and what we can do to add to those next year to give more people more opportunities to go and celebrate in a healthy, safe way. And finally, I participated in a discussion with staff relative to an MOU for CDFW land along at least Pebble Beach Drive. For years, we've been operating without an MOU, and we want to get that updated and develop some guidelines on what our building maintenance will do with regard to maintaining that property. That is my report.
Supervisor Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a busy couple of weeks, and I'm sure everybody's been active. My focus has been around some particular issues as it relates to budget shortfalls with the Del Norte Senior Center. One of the programs that the Senior Center particularly relies on is the Senior Nutrition Program that feeds well over 800 seniors in our community. Most recently, due to some budget shortfalls with one of our standard funding sources, which has typically been the Community Development Block Grant, which the county supports the application to that system to HUD. There's a gap year this year, unfortunately, the way things have timed out. And it represents about a $260,000 budget shortfall to that program, which would impact a large number of seniors in our community that are delivered a home service, a meal. Not exactly sure how to wrestle with this at this point, but a $260,000 shortfall in a budget record, I mean, it's dramatic income shift on how to essentially prioritize funding. So I'm working with the chair and the director right now to develop some scenarios on how we could play this out long-term to continue providing the services, but find additional income streams that is going to patch that shortfall for this coming fiscal year. And I'm not sure where that dollar is going to come from. We have some ideas on the table. I've approached various groups within the community to address some of those concerns. But I would love to put it out at this point in time to the community, to our departments, how we could think a little outside the box in helping to keep one of our more important programs in the community going. And I'm looking at Brunel because I would love to follow up with you on this in the future to see if there's any programs within DHSS that could help support this. I know Supervisor Starkey sits on the Area 1 agency. There's a great deal of funds from Area 1 that comes into this program, but it's not enough currently to address the shortfalls to our seniors within the community. So I wanted to touch on that briefly. Also had conversations with our director of the North Coast Resource Partnership. It's a partnership that Supervisor Wilson and I sit on that handles a lot of grant funding as it relates to water and biomass utilization in our community. We're fortunate Del Norte's never had a North Coast Resource Partnership meeting in our community since I've been on the board, and previously when my predecessor was on the board. We've been able to now support a date, October 17th and 18th here in Del Norte, and pushing forward with finding a facility for that to occur. I think we potentially landed one at the Elk Valley Rancheria Community Center, but this will bring in a group of potentially 100 to 150 people for that meeting in Del Norte. I'm happy that we're hosting it here in the coming months. Also had meetings and webinars with which were hosted by the Secretary of Resources, in this case Wade Crowfoot, as it relates to the removal of Klamath River dams. I also know Assistant CAO Hooper also attended those discussions. I was hoping for a lot more out of them. As you're likely aware, the county was quite involved in the negotiation process of how those dams were removed, to the point where we could address some of the issues once dams are removed, how that sediment flows downstream and impacts our infrastructure, in particular the infrastructure of our boat ramps and our harbor. Some of the things that have come out of these discussions, in particular related to this year's fishing season for Dungeness crab, which were dramatically impacted from those sediment flows this winter. In following up with a lot of the commercial fishermen, they were pulling up traps with dead animals in them, essentially. That's of great deal of concern to me. But one of the tools that we did put in place, because there was a lot of dissension among the state whether or not, depending on tides, those sediments would flow north or flow south. Anecdotally, and from the commercial fishermen, we know quite well what direction those sediments flowed. But the state didn't believe us, but we were able to negotiate through our county council a process where we put equipment out there in the ocean to measure bathymetric data, which is essentially a sounding sonar type system that measures increases in sediments on the ocean floor. I'm very eager to follow up with our consultant that we hired through the process, which was additionally funded with the state funds to monitor that equipment to see how those impacts from this new release has impacted not only our harbor, but the area out in front of the harbor, because it does impact whether or not we have monies to dredge in the future. So something I'm paying a great deal of attention to. We did have a first meeting of the Drought Task Force here in Del Norte County, where we're addressing long-term residential well water levels. And then in addition, had an interview with Julie Seisnick with the University of Oregon. Julie is focused on a study with her and her partners at the university to look at impacts on counties with a significant amount of public lands, in this case, Forest Service lands. And so these studies are looking at communities up and down the Pacific coast and as far inland as Idaho and Montana that have been impacted over the last 40 years of the Northwest Forest Plan. I was selected as one of those folks as being not only the district representative for the substantial amount of those public lands, but also because of my history with managing forests within our area. The interview went quite well, but I was spent some time with after the meeting just to learn potentially some results from other communities. And I just wanted to say I'm looking forward to the report coming out, but the impacts to Del Norte County were not impacts that we didn't share with other communities of similar sizes. And it's tough. I know there's going to be a monumental pendulum swing within the Forest Service under USDA to get us back on track with forest utilization, but that pendulum swing in the last 40 years has created a great deal of generational poverty that we still haven't crawled out of to date, and we're realizing through our various programs the impacts of what the closure of some of those resource-based industries have done to our community. And it's hopefully we'll have these studies now to approach our congressional representatives with to say, hey, it's time for that pendulum to swing back forth and not only take care of the people who live here in our community, but utilize some of this resource that we seem to want to continue floating up into the atmosphere as smoke. So I'm really looking forward to the results of this study. The last thing I'm paying a great deal of attention to is the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board's process for irrigated lands. This has been a process that was first discussed with the water boards back in 2018 and was put as a low priority because it really specifically addressed irrigated lands of lily fields within Del Norte County. There's no other lily operations within the state of California other than in here in Del Norte County, and it was a low priority for the water board, but they've now started their process up and are holding processes for the public and stakeholders for input as they develop planning documents for regulation of that industry, either further or to keep it status quo. So it'll be an interesting process, but a lot of us here are paying a great deal of attention to it because it is one of the last agricultural industries in our community. And that's the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Short, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, a little bit of kudos to our county rec department. On the 19th, the rec department had its summer campers program, go visit the city fire station, and fire captain called me and said, man, there was a ton of kids that showed up, and they all had a great time. So just wanted to say kudos to the rec department for putting on that program and mentoring so many kids in our community. Special thanks to John Horner for setting up that part of the camp. Excuse me. I took a tour of our county roads department. Richard Mello showed me around. We looked at all the equipment. He explained how it's used and the department issues and how they maintain it and how they even in some cases build their own pieces of equipment to do the best that they can for the county. I attended the North Coast EMS MAC meeting where, among other things, we gave an update to the group about where we are in that process, in the competitive process for ambulance services in Delaware County. Attended multiple meetings in regard to the general site design of the our new homeless shelter and micro village at the Williams Drive site, and we'll be getting an update from Director Brown at our next meeting. Attended a webinar hosted by California City News. They asked a law firm to discuss the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision around City of Grants Pass versus Johnson, which, you know, of course, centers around our homeless issue. It was good news. They found that the 9th District decision at Boise was a little bit flawed in that we can actually trespass homeless people if they return to places that they're not supposed to be. So this is good news for our community and for law enforcement and how we're going to act on those that are illegally camping. And lastly, I attended an after-action review of the South Beach fireworks incident. This was proctored by our own OES director, Deborah Ottenberg. Overall, the medical part of the incident was run pretty well due to cooperation from all the agencies involved. From the initial call by paramedic on Del Norte Ambulance, her name is Kit. She made a very early declaration that this is an MCI. It kind of flips a switch in all your responders. They know what they're going to. They've been trained. They know the plan. So that was a great job by her, great decision by her to do that. And also the sheriff and the fire chief immediately met at scene and assumed a unified command. And many pieces of the puzzle just fell together after that. Del Norte Ambulance staff did a great job and transported the last victim that they did transport about 45 minutes after the initial call out. So relatively short amount of time. And also thanks to Cal ORA's due, they upstaffed in Oregon, so they were able to send us 2 units, mutual aid, to cover calls while Del Norte Ambulance was taxed with that MCI, and they ended up running 2 calls during that time. So we appreciate their support as well. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Borges. You're good. Good news for the public is that the young child, 3-year-old that was injured, has been moved out for critical condition, is now into the general at the hospital. So that is good news, and that his recovery is moved from a state of concern to he's just being in the general portion of the hospital. So recovery is is making, and it looks like he's going to make a recovery. To what extent of his injuries, who knows? At this point in time, we haven't been really briefed on that, but at least that is the positive direction for the young child injured at the scene of that tragedy. Several meetings we attended, and again, looking forward to seeing the changes in legislation that came out of the Supreme Court and what actions we will be taking going forward. The shelter is moving forward, as well as progress on demolition of the and eventual removal of the old mental health building and preparation of the site. And we're looking forward towards seeing more progress as we go forward. And now we move from that to our consent agenda. Is there any public comment as to items on the consent agenda today?
I see at least you've pared down the consent agenda to a reasonable amount of items. I see that Health and Human Services is not overly representative with new contracts and agreements for dysfunctional people. I will not comment on the fact that you only allow 3 minutes for public comment for, 11 items, because apparently Bob is offended by my continual comments on the fact that the Board of Supervisors refuses to allow a suitable amount of time to comment on what ordinarily is relatively lengthy consent agendas that represent a substantial amount of the county's business. And I would hope that in the future, many more of the items that are on the consent agenda would appear in the general business portion of the Board of Supervisors meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve items 1 through 9 on the consent agenda.
Second.
And
We have a motion and a second. Any other comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to make note of items 3 and 4 specifically on the agenda. Really want to give a big shout out to Elk Valley Rancheria for their partnership here with the county and our CSD in addressing these issues. They've shown time and time again in partnership with the city and now with the county that utilizing funding sources that we don't have access to really helps support a community partnership and reflects quite well in addressing these type of services here. And kudos to our CDD and Public Works Department in getting an inventory taken care of with a substantial amount of money. I mean, $3 million is going to go a long way to inventorying our water systems here, our creeks and drainages as it relates to our road infrastructure, and putting those dollars together to best plan and prioritize how we address some of the potentially long-term failing infrastructure in our system down the road. So good job, CDD. Please pass it on to Ms. Bauer. Oh, she's right there. Sorry.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. Please poll the vote.
Supervisor Howard,
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey,
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. Take a moment, take a breath. We got 1 minute. Hopefully everyone's having a good day today. So we're going to open the floor up to, this is comment period on anything that the public wishes to address the Board of Supervisors or the jurisdiction of the board. If you have been or addressing any of the board regarding this matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comment until the board takes up that matter, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. You have any comments? that are not addressed on our agenda, please come forward, and the mic is one.
Thank you.
We're right there.
May I start?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Good morning. My name is Donna Rushing. I am a longtime resident and employee of Del Norte County, 18 years to be specific. I am one of the many faces that is counting on you to do the right thing. Del Norte County is currently in negotiations with the mid-management group, and I am also one of the negotiators for MMG. I am disappointed in the way that the board conducted themselves at the June 25th board meeting. You attempted to circumvent the reclassification process and tried to give a raise to a specific department. You stated that the department is understaffed and deserves a raise, deserves higher pay. This is the case for all departments within the county. Will you be fighting for raises of all departments when it comes time to approving and signing the MOU? Reclassifications are not the avenue to simply give raises. And that is the avenue you took to quickly give raises rather than acting in good faith and giving COLAs to all of your employees through the negotiation process. This unfair practice needs to end, and the proper policies need to be followed going forward. We need to have faith in our board to follow the rules, even when they do not agree with them. It was unfortunate that a department head did not provide timely or sufficient documentation, but the CAO was acting in good faith and was working with that department head within the policies the county has put in place to ensure fairness for all. You, as a board, must answer to your voters. You should not feel that you are above the rules that you are so quick to uphold against anyone that you disagree with. We want to see you uphold yourselves to those same rules. We demand COLAs for all of our employees to bring us to a fair living wage and for it to be done through the proper steps and not have our MOUs and negotiation process be sidestepped. This is not about semantics. This is about a fair process being upheld and trusted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Ullman Kirkpatrick, and I'm also an employee over at DHHS. The decision today doesn't just affect the Roads Division, whose members unquestionably deserve the raises that they are slated to receive, but all employees across our various departments, our dedicated workforce. It is currently overworked, short-staffed, and underpaid. We must address the problem collectively to ensure that the well-being and efficiency of our entire organization. We always look to address this issue in the future, but for the future, whether this is through wage compensation studies or waiting until the time as negotiations are opened, we continue to live in the future, so it doesn't get addressed in the present, and we need to get further than going further behind. I ask that you keep this in mind as we go forward.
Thank you.
Can I ask what department you work for in your position? I know what Donna works for, but
I work for the public health, and I'm the public health nutrition manager.
thank you.
Linda Sutter, I don't work here, and I'm glad. Let me tell you,
Sorry.
you got department heads. Let's talk about Let's talk about how much they make. Girls might want to listen to this. Miss Kung still gets $176,204 in 2023, but with her benefit package, which includes pension, $336,776. That's quite a bit. Neil Lopez, $181,489 regular pay, with his benefit package, $332,898. Miss Lopez, $138,455 regular pay, and $256,000 for a benefit. Oh, God. My daughter works in this county. And she can afford to pay her rent and her car payment and her utilities. And after that, she has $56 for gas and groceries to support her child. That's what it is with most people working here. It's outrageous. And for you guys to keep giving these kind of people raises because they put in time, I think you might consider freezing these raises on your department heads. You need to start paying attention to the people that are the backbone of this county. You need to pay them a viable wage. Nobody should have to go hungry. Currently in the United States, 39% of the population goes without meals in the day. 39%. 62% of our nation lives from paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 4 people are strapped with medical bills in our country. You guys need to really consider paying our people. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see today we have a more normal audience in the room, and you're not being castigated for 30, 35, 40 minutes over the beachfront issue. But I am disappointed in the fact that the people that showed up for the 30-minute rampage failed to stay for the absolutely ludicrous expense of nearly $400,000 for the 2 parking lots using Measure R money, and don't feel that that's important enough to point out to this board that that's not a vital issue for this county, that there are far more important things to address. The fact that the county is going to spend another anywhere from $50,000 to $225,000 to try to take care of the complaints of the local fire department over the ambulance service. I'm hoping that perhaps this time around you can find an ambulance service that can get along with the fire department, or vice versa. I'm not sure exactly what the problem is, but they appear to be the only emergency services in the county that objects to the current ambulance service in a unified fashion. I am sincerely disappointed that it takes a child to fill the seats at the Board of Supervisors, yet there are a number of issues that this board passes routinely 5-0 in the affirmative that are as important to the community, in the sense that it's money spent that doesn't supply us with useful and vital services that we desperately need. And I'm thrilled about the fact that the Employees Association has finally tumbled onto the fact that reef classification is a way that this board gives raises to various upper-level employees in the county, yet for some reason can't seem to do the same for the average worker in the county who doesn't get paid very well, except in the way that the roads department was handled, which is appalling. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll go on to our 10:30 time item. We have a federal legislative policy update by Greg Bird's Thorn Run Partners. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you all as well. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be with you today. I'm Greg Burns with Thorn Run Partners. As you all know, I work on your behalf in Washington, D.C. and have for many, many years. It obviously, well, first of all, it's always hard to transition even for me, just listening as an audience member, from some of the stuff that you guys have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, to then jump to like, oh, well, here's what's happening in Washington, because it's just sort of like, not only is it a continent away, but it just feels so disconnected. So I'm recognizing that and acknowledging that. So anyway, things have been a little strange in Washington for the past month, or just sort of out in the country, hard to ignore, right? All that's going on at the federal level. But I will say most of that's related to the election, or at least some of it, And so that's not really what drives my work on your behalf. That is not what drives, the county's agenda. That is not really, it's obviously impactful. The results of the election will be impactful, but the day-to-day sort of, ebbs and flows of those types of things don't really matter to our day-to-day work. So we've had a lot of success, even with all of the craziness in Washington. You'll recall that over the past couple of years, we've had the return of what's known as the community-funded projects process. The county's been extraordinarily successful through that process, so I'm very proud of that. We now are in our 4th year of that process, 3 years that have been fully completed and 1 year that we're partially involved in. So far, in the 3 years that have been fully completed, we've had more than $4 million returned to the county for a variety of projects. So those include most recently Pike Field, but before that we were able to do an RMS and CAD system, computer-aided dispatch system, and a records management system for the Sheriff's Department. And also we were able to secure $3 million for the jail renovation project. So we've had a lot of success. The first item, actually 3 years ago, was supported most prominently by former Senator Feinstein, who obviously is now no longer with us. But the last two have been supported by Congressman Huffman, and so we do need to thank him for his work on behalf of the county and recognizing, the fact that you all have put forward good projects that are widely supported by the community. So I know that you all are getting started on the Pike Field work. I've seen some notices that you're going to start a conversation with the community, if that hasn't already happened, to talk about what kinds of investments should be made there. But just know that because of the efforts of Congressman Huffman, you do have $500,000 set aside for that project, at least to start. So that's something. We also have some work that we've been doing this year to try to get some additional funding in the current year process. So we do have renovations for the Veterans Hall supported by both of your Senators Butler and Padilla. So that's been very positive. We did submit a project to Congressman Huffman, but to be honest, not only does he have a large geographic region in his district and has a lot of folks that he wants to constantly try to be helpful to, and he's been helpful to us now 2 years in a row. But sometimes you're sort of a victim of your own success. We've had a couple of years in a row where he's been helpful, and a year before that where we really got some strong support from one of our senators, and they have to spread the love, is what I would suggest. It wasn't that we submitted a bad project. So I think we'll be in a good spot to continue to work with them in the future. But we do have that Veterans Hall renovations project supported by both your senators. We don't yet know the outcome of their efforts, but we will probably fairly soon. Actually, in the next couple of weeks, we might have an indication. So I'll be sure to share that with your team and make sure that you all are kept in the loop with respect to that. I did want to note that Congressman Huffman did support funding for the Community Civic Center and EOC project. I am not clear as to how much you all may know about whether or not that was funded. Unfortunately, it was not funded in the House bills that it would have been funded in. So I don't know if his office has shared that information with you or not, but he did support it and did what he could on behalf of the county and behalf of that request, but unfortunately it did not go any further. Of course, returning funding is nice, and we didn't have that we didn't have that opportunity for a decade prior to these project opportunities coming back, but there's still so much more that we're working on your behalf on a day-to-day basis. So I'll name a couple of those items. Secure rural schools reauthorization is obviously critically important for the community because you actually get millions of dollars every year from that program, and so we want to ensure that that continues. And it's been a little easier, I will say, over the last couple of years to get that program reauthorized, maybe the last time or two, but there were periods back in the 2000s where it was not easy and it was not a given, and it was like fighting and scrapping. There was one example where Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon was, one of the challenges with paying for a lot of these things, or doing a lot of these things like the secure rural schools reauthorization, is you have to find a way to pay for them, which I know sounds ridiculous, but in the arcane way that Congress does things, you have to be able to show that you have some sort of pay for. So for instance, if you pass a tax cut, you have to be able to show that you're also either increasing taxes or cutting spending, or you're projecting revenue increases, for instance, because of the tax cut. So even though you may not know that that occurs, it does. So when they propose to spend money, for instance, on the secure rural schools reauthorization, it can be challenging because they have to find an offset. So one year, Ron Wyden, many, many years ago, we sold helium from a national helium stockpile, which is like the craziest thing, but that's what they did. And I don't know if helium is important to keep around or not. I really have no idea, but like that's how kind of difficult it was, just about a decade ago. It's gotten a little easier lately. I'm hopeful that it'll remain a little easier in the near term, but you just never know how things will play out in Washington and how things may change. But the SRS reauthorization is included in a bill called the Farm Bill in the House, which has yet to pass the House, but it at least has been passed out of committee. Of course, the Farm Bill does a whole lot of other things, not only farming, but it also does a supplemental nutrition assistance program, so SNAP food benefits for folks. So it's critically important for a variety of reasons to the community, but it also includes the SRS reauthorization in the House at least. The Senate actually passed a standalone SRS reauthorization out of committee last year. So they've also gone about the same distance in terms of getting this done. Both of these things are good. It means that they acknowledge that they want to address the problem. And, this is one of those things that could get worked into a kind of a year-end package that they might work on later this year. The last SRS reauthorization actually was included as a part of the American Rescue Plan Act, which happened right after COVID. So that was the last time we had that reauthorization. They tend to be for about 2 to 3 years, again, depending on the revenue that they can find to pay for it. Another thing that has recently happened over the past year is the preservation of the Essential Air Service Program. So of course, you all know how critical that is to the community. Congress did pass an FAA bill that basically maintained the program status quo, which is great for you all. That's what you want. There were attacks, as there always are, to try to do away with it. There was an amendment on the floor that was considered and voted on the House floor, excuse me, that would have more or less decimated the program. Thankfully, it did not pass, it did not pass at all, but it didn't even have much support. It was maybe 50 votes to do away with it. So that means that there's, roughly 375 or 80 or so in support of the program. So that's positive. Of course, Congressman Huffman and all your local folks nearby supported the maintenance of the EAS program. Although I will acknowledge that Congressman McClintock is the one who traditionally tries to do away with the program, and he's not too far away. Another item, PILT funding, payment in lieu of taxes, is also a program that has gotten a little easier to keep funded over the past couple of years, but again, faced much more challenge in the early 2000s. So we want to always maintain a focus on that. In terms of more local issues that are very Del Norte County unique, of course, we have last chance grade. And you all know as well as I do that they picked an alternative and there's still a long way to go. But I spend quite a bit of time trying to remind folks of the fact that this is out there. It's a long-term challenge. We need to maintain a focus on it and that they can't forget about it. And not that I want to have parts of, the highway to the south, fall in, like not in Del Norte, but like Monterey area. I always use those as examples. I share that with folks in Washington. I'm like, this is exactly what would happen in Del Norte too, and let me describe the impact of what that would look like for this community as well as to the south and the north. So, it's a good opportunity to share those experiences. And then, of course, one of my favorite topics, I guess, over the years is forest issues. And I know that Supervisor Hemmingson is no longer on the board, but that was always a baby of his, and I know it remains a priority for many of you. we did ensure that you all had an opportunity to formally comment on the rewriting of the Northwest Forest Plan. I don't know if you all are up to speed on the fact that the federal government, it's been 30 to 40 years since they wrote that plan the first time, which feels crazy, but it's been that long. So they are redoing that. I think there's some really some beneficial things in there, and certainly some things that we talked about I think that were beneficial, but there's also some things that you all should think about, as time moves. Some of the stuff that we focused on with respect to that forest plan, obviously proactive forest management, timber harvest when it makes sense and when the federal government would actually be willing to do it. Wildfire mitigation. I came in on 199, of course, to visit with you all, and of course you can see the impacts of the more recent fire, although it's great that they've cleared out the dead timber like along the road, like close to the road. So I mean, you wish you had done that before, maybe before the fire occurred, but better late than never, I suppose, for the future. We focused on recreational opportunities, which we always want to promote. We think that that's like an area where more people should be able to be very supportive, ensuring that there's access and opportunity to recreate on the lands that we have. And so those are some of the things that we've focused on. With respect to the Northwest Forest Plan and the way that the Forest Service is considering forests in the future, obviously fire risk seems to be changing. It's becoming a little bit, more damaging when it occurs. It's occurring more often. So they're certainly taking a different look at that and not sort of looking at, well, what does the last 75 years of fire activity look like, but more is what does the last 15 years of fire activity look like, and let's project what that looks like into the future. So that's happening. The other thing, though, is that since they wrote the Northwest Forest Plan, many, many years ago, trees that have lived for that 50-year period, they're now starting to look at a little differently because they may have been younger trees back then, but now they're more mature. And so they're starting to classify more lands as old growth. And then they've come up with what I would say is sort of a new terminology of just sort of mature growth, which is not old growth, but acknowledging that it's different than it was 40 to 50 years ago if it survived that long. And I think that that's going to be a shift in ways that the Forest Service looks at, the forests in the future, and it's something that we have to sort of keep an eye on and be more mindful of what that means for the future, in the way that they might manage forests and whatnot. So just something to throw out there so that you're aware of it. We've also recently been trying to facilitate some conversations with the Forest Service related to Barrow Ranch, to see what we could possibly do in partnership with them. So I don't know if that's something that's come before the board, but I know that I've worked with staff on it, so I wanted to mention that. And we can talk more about that. I didn't mean to throw a wrench in any discussions that have yet to occur. But yeah, those are some of the issues that I just wanted to highlight for you today. I hope that that's been helpful. Happy to answer any questions. There's always more that we're doing. This morning I was out getting breakfast and I saw a Redwood transit bus drive by, and I reminded myself that they just received an award of about $500,000 from the federal government to purchase some new, more efficient buses. So that's exciting. There's actually been a pretty decent amount of money that's been sort of coming from the federal government into the region, lately, not just Delaware County sort of specific interests, but more broadly. And that was one of the things that I, recalled when I saw the bus pass by. So anyway, happy to answer any questions you may have, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Any questions from the board?
Greg, you mentioned the age of the trees and the Forest Service talking about that. I know that as a board, we commented on that during its public comment period. I think they were looking at 80-year-old trees then. Did they put that into policy now? Are they calling those old growth trees now? Anything 50 or 80 years old and older?
I don't think it's that clear cut, number one, but number two, they haven't finished the plan. So what they've done is they've accepted public comment. And so we've provided public comment through a formal letter to the Forest Service. They're accepting public comment from anyone who wants to comment. That comment period is probably closed, but I wouldn't anticipate that they would have the new forest plan finished for some period of time. It takes a while for them to sort of review all the comments, figure out if they want to adjust the plan, and then make those adjustments and then finalize it. We also, obviously, mentioning the election could change the way that this kind of plan is developed. If it's not finished prior to this administration and we have a new administration that doesn't see things the same way, then it could look very differently, or they could just sort of scuttle the whole effort. So there's all kinds of things that we'll have to keep an eye on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any public comment? Questions?
That's, okay. You can go to public comment first. I'll wait.
Seeing none? Go back. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, great. Greg, you've been with us well over 20 years now.
Not that long.
Long before I came on the board. Been through multiple partners. Obviously, for the very, I just want to say I appreciate for the very little that you come on board with to represent us in DC. Really appreciate your time, and more importantly, really appreciate the discussion this morning about the Northwest Forest Plan. It's something that weighs heavily on my mind, being that our largest landowner in our backyard, the Forest Service, it impacts how our forests are managed in the future. We've unfortunately got some complexities as it relates to the forest plan and the management differences with a national recreation area versus a forest health plan overall, but there's paths forward. And more importantly, we also have individuals that have grown up here in Six Rivers National Forest now in leadership positions within the forest back in DC, Randy Moore, and that makes it a big difference and really playing forward Delaware County's priorities as it relates to that plan. And I highly recommend, and I know you do this already, is ensuring that you remind him where he grew up, where he cut his teeth, and the problems that we're having currently. And I'll be more than happy to travel back there to ensure that the reminder takes place. I do appreciate you bringing up the essential air service piece. I know it's something that you've gone to bat for us many, many, many years in a row, but it wasn't the only pieces that you've gone to bat for us on. Economic development here has been very important to our conversations, most recently, as you've supported in the past with harbor development, airport development, sewer development, Highway 199, our broadband pieces. Those are all pieces that came before you, and you helped to drive with us at the level, federal level in DC. It's incredibly important now, and why I wanted to have a brief shout out on this is that most recently the county's made some decisions to separate from our other partnering agencies and move forward potentially individually on a standalone basis with economic development here in the community. In doing so, we're kind of in this odd place right now in really looking at what economic development means without our other partnering agencies and how we're going to roll out a plan here in Delaware County. We haven't discussed this a lot in the past, but I know there's a lot of agencies, USDA in particular, and the Small Business Administration that could potentially help rural counties like Del Norte craft plans that would offset our budget, particularly whether it's a grant or something else, but would help offset our budget in this planning process and maybe help us advance this timeline so we don't have this big gap of time while we're debating on priorities and planning processes for economic development for the future of this community. So hoping to put that on your radar and look for suggestions from you in the future on how best to approach that, even if it means coming to DC.
Well, and if I may, I'll comment on it now. The Economic Development Administration, as part of the Department of Commerce, would be the first agency that I would actually look to, rather than some of the others that you mentioned. Not that the others can't help in a way, but they will fund what are known as Community Economic Development Strategy Plans. So they call them CEDS. And in order to be eligible for other funding through the EDA, you have to have a CEDS. So that's like the baseline standard plan, but they will help fund the planning effort. So if you all get to a point where you decide that you want to move forward, it's very easy for us to facilitate a conversation with the Economic Development Administration in Washington, and they have regional reps as well. In fact, the one for this region, I believe, was in Washington beforehand, and is now, if she's still employed, is with the EDA, is in Sacramento. So it's not hard for us to facilitate those conversations, make those introductions, help you all figure out how to apply for the CEDS money. They do have specific planning money set aside for that stuff. So I think that's a great point, and thank you for bringing it up.
My only comment is, as we're talking about the land management plan that they're putting together, this is something that they're required to do every 10 years or 16 years, I believe, and they haven't done it. I think the last one for Six Rivers National Park was 2016 expired. So it's been long overdue. The other thing that concerns me always greatly is that within the confines of those land management plans, they're required by their own federal law to include their stakeholders. All the stakeholders are supposed to be at the table while these plans are being drafted, not after the plans have been drafted, not at the final phase of the process. Are the stakeholders supposed to be ingrained in this process? Also, their land management plans are supposed to be looking at our land management plans to make sure that they're in congruence, or that there's no conflicts within those two plans, and whatever there is a conflict, that those are supposed to be addressed and mitigated.
Right.
And very few times have I ever seen, heard, or been approached by them to get engaged in this process at the beginning stages where we should be included. It is because of that Red Mountain was removed off of their land management plan without consultation, without integration. And so, the impacts of what they do, what they decide to do, and not having our voice at the table at the point where we should be at the initial design of these plans, to make sure that Delaware County, that our plans, our process is in conjunction with theirs. And so I appreciate you bringing it forward and addressing it this time.
And, I think we need to stay on top of these things, and I appreciate that comment, because it is easy for them to sort of just go and do their work, and then they just send it to you at the end, and they're like, here, this is how things are going to be.
Yeah, oftentimes it comes to us at the time when the public comment period is required by law,
Right.
to be put out and addressed, and not at the development stage, which is where they're supposed to be engaging with us at the process. Thank you.
So I'll just mention also that the last time that you all came to Washington to visit, or had a group of folks come to Washington to visit, was probably pre-COVID. So it's been a few years. I don't think actually that this fall would be an ideal time, simply because of the election. And we anticipate that the members will be mostly not in Washington. But, I think that maybe next spring, for instance, might be good. May is always a nice time. And a useful time. You're past some of the it's going to be very busy with an inauguration and sort of a starting up of a new Congress, which is going to look different. Every seat in the House is up and a third of the Senate's up. So we're going to have a lot of changes. That all takes a while to get sorted out. But certainly shortly thereafter, or in the summertime, could be a decent time to come. And so keep that in mind as you all begin to plan for next year.
Yeah, I personally appreciate that suggestion. I know it's been since 2018, I believe, since the county was last represented in DC. And I know we do a tremendous amount of advocacy work there. I think spring is potentially ideal because it allows the process that we've now approved through our strategic planning process to get some of our house in order and figure out where we're going to prioritize our advocacy efforts, so we can better direct you and your time in placing those meetings for us and making them to the point.
Yeah.
So do appreciate that. We'll definitely be considering for sure, I'm sure.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That brings us to general government, regular items. Item 12, approve and authorize Director of Community Development Department, Director, in coordination with Human Resources, to hire at a step higher than Step A, but not higher than Step C, for positions identified as hard to fill by the Director pursuant to Article 4, Section 4.5, and Section 4.6 SEIU of the Memorandum of Understanding between Delaware County and the Delaware County Mid-Management Group and the Delaware County Employees Association, CIU, Local 1021, to assist in addressing the current staffing crisis in the Roads Division as requested by the Director and recommended by the County Administrative and Human Services. Do we have any public comment on this here? No public comment? Bring it back to the board for discussion. Oh. Sorry. Didn't see you stand.
No big deal. Jeff Daniels, county resident. Worked for the road division for 30 years plus. I don't want to throw stones at anybody, but, and I won't. It's not me. I just see the fewer cars within the parking lot there, so there's less employees there, so the work's not getting done. And the bottom line is it comes down to safety. And I know it's a challenge just to hire right now for those types of jobs because they're not out there. It's really hard to pull from, it's real small, right? So I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a salary increase, and it needs to be significant. I know it's hard to do, I understand that, but it has to happen in order to pull somebody in. When I started, we used to be close to Caltrans, and we're pretty far apart from Caltrans. You can't get somebody that's qualified if you're not going to pay them. And it should be a career job. You know, that was my career. That's what I started at $7.15 an hour. Did I struggle? Yeah. Did I work 2 jobs? Did I do other things? Absolutely I did. But the fact of the matter is, we need to pay these people. And, you know, it's a critical job. It's not as easy as it used to be. You know, you got cell phones out there, people driving cars. And, you know, I've been there when someone has lost their life. Okay, that's a tough one. That's a real tough one. I haven't seen any other departments lose their lives in their jobs. You know, guys get hit by cars or gals, whatever the case may be. You know, it's a serious job. And it doesn't need to be compared with other jobs. You know, I get it. And here there was, it just talked about the way, where's it at? There's the market wages. What are the market wages here? What are we comparing them to? You know, the market wage, when I was there, they were going to Caltrans. They were going to the feds. They were going to the state. I lost over a dozen employees, and they didn't leave because they didn't like the job. They left because of money. And I think it's important that money needs to be thrown in that direction to keep them there so they can have a career, so they can enjoy it like I did. I mean, I loved my job. I'm glad I'm retired now. But you know what? I worked for that, and I get to enjoy my grandkids and my family, and so it's tough. You guys have a tough job. I realize that, but there needs to be a significant amount of money, and I've seen numbers. I know numbers. You know, you guys know them too. I don't want to be redundant, but I just want to give my opinion, and that's how I feel. And I really think you guys should consider. You know, it needs to be more significant to actually keep people there. It is a tough job. It's not easy going out in the middle of the night clearing trees and culverts and things like that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
So this item, and Mr. Daniels, I hope you'll stick around for the other topics, but this item here is to allow something that we allow with pretty much all other departments. I didn't realize that this one wasn't one of them, is that they can come in as be hired at a step C instead of a step A. And we did this recently for the sheriff's department. And in speaking with the sheriff, it's good on paper, but it's not good in practice. Because what's happening is the sheriff or the deputies that we bring in at a step A, 2 months ago, and now we're looking to hire, and so that now we're bringing them at a step C now, and there's not, this formula isn't really something that is effective other than it looks good on paper. So I'm willing to approve it today because I think we're making steps, right? We need to make steps in the right direction. But I'm going to say that you're going to find that this is a little bit more difficult to implement because of the equity beyond that. And that's at least what the sheriff, I had hoped that he'd be here today to kind of talk firsthand how this has been difficult for him. Unfortunately, he's not here. So that's just my comments. I am going to approve this today because I think we've got to make a step in the right direction, and this is one of those.
Mr. Chairman, just some questions for CAO, and then some thoughts on this. I guess we've essentially looked at a process that will allow us to go out and look at some comparables through a very large countywide study where we'll go out and look at other communities, and it's just not for one department, it's just not for roads, just not for the sheriff's department, it's for every department in the county. I guess my concerns there is what do we anticipate the timeline to be, and does this kind of put us in, I understand that there's this urgency to address the issue, potentially the bleed and recruitment issues we're seeing at the road department, but would it be more prudent for us to take up this issue at a later date once that study is completed? I guess my question is, what is your opinion on that, given that the board's authorized you to go out and hire the consultant to do the study that allow us to actually have the facts in place before we start shifting things around quite dramatically?
Well, I think to address your first question, it's you have authorized the comp analysis, and it's 4 to 6 months out based on what the consultants have given us for a timeline to complete that study. This step right here is basically just a tool that's available in the MOU. It's been bargained for by our represented groups. So it's just to assist the department, if they choose to use this as a recruitment tool to hire at a step higher than step A. The board can authorize that. Supervisor Starkey is absolutely correct. This is available to all the departments. What we're asking for right now is authorization for the department head not to have to bring this back each time, but to include this in a recruitment. So instead of hiring at the hourly rate A, you can hire at C. Now, this is also a decision of the department head and the appointing authority. Supervisor Starkey is also correct. If you hired somebody 3 months ago at an A and then hire somebody at a C, that's your decision based on the issues you're dealing with. If it's a crisis, if it's health and safety, if you're trying to fill gaps, your other employees should understand that too. You're giving them support. You're giving them other people to work with them out in the field. So it's a management decision.
Thank you.
The way that this goes is what we're looking at in both 12 and 13 is something that has been asked for. It's something that already existed for the most part in most departments, but the authority being given directly to the department head as opposed to having to always go back through the board for this approval is what's being changed here. And what this does is it gives our department heads more flexibility in the hiring process and in the trying to make the job hiring more attractive to the individual that they're trying to entice to come here. If the person has years of experience, background, has that thing, that he can be hired, that person can be hired at a higher level, higher step, and within the ABC range. And so giving those tools to our department heads at this point in time when trying to attract qualified and competent employees is hard and difficult, this just gives them one more tool to be able to use. And it also gives them the authority for that to be done at the onset of their discussions with this employee, so that it's something that does not have to come back automatically to the board for our approval. Again, because we have a real issue with hiring at this point in time and retention at this point in time, primarily this is to address hiring, not retention, that these are tools to be utilized, and giving tools and the authority to our department heads is a way that hopefully they can utilize it at the time when they need it to try to capture that employee that they're trying to bring into Del Norte County, whether it's to the sheriff's office or the road department or any of our other departments that are lacking. Right now, many of our departments are critical in their staffing levels, and this is just a one more tool that we can give to our department heads to try to address their issues. And I think we have to try to do as much as we can within the confines of our structure that we currently have to try to facilitate those kinds of structural changes that we need. And this is one more tool, and that's what we're adopting at this point in time. We're trying to adopt.
Mr. Chairman, I don't necessarily agree with the discussion that you've just had. I guess my next question is, how would the decision be communicated back to the board? Since we're bypassing our traditional process, how would that department head decision that step took place, how would that decision be communicated back to the board in the future? So, if at all.
However you directed it to be, I mean, if at all, it could be something that would be an update by the department head. if they chose to do that. The process would be exactly the same, except that it would be skipping waiting for a board meeting every Tuesday and every fourth Tuesday, or second and fourth Tuesday of every month. So it just gives them more flexibility. It's a blanket authorization as opposed to a hire by hire process.
Thank you. Closed.
I asked if there was any further comment, and nobody stood up, so we were done.
We're going to get
That's
to
it.
that item pretty soon. That's 15.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just wanted to say that I also talked to the sheriff. Going to kind of put you on the spot now, Sheriff, being you just walked in, because I was curious how this went, because we did this for the sheriff's office, a few months back. So asking him, said it was kind of difficult in his department. I'm still supportive of it. I don't want to be critical of it. I'm still supportive of it, because if there is an avenue where the department head doesn't find the obstacles that the sheriff has, then I definitely am open to them having that. But I just wanted people to be aware that the sheriff has had challenges with this, and hoping you'd talk to that.
Yeah, I can speak to it. I think the Step C approval is something I would highly recommend as a tool. But there's concerns with it. For example, if I bring someone in at a Step C that has a year of experience, and I have someone that's currently employed at a Step A, I can't move that person up. And I've talked to the CAO about this too. There are union concerns with that and MOU issues with that. So that's something we have to look at. But the Step C is just one more little tool that does offer an opportunity to help. So the inequity part is a concern. How do you fix the A's and B's that you currently have staffed? And that's something, I've already talked to Neil about it too, and it's going to require maybe a side letter or something like that. But I agree with him. I've read the MOU and looked at it, and there are concerns with it. So I applaud you guys. It's a tough situation, and we're all in the same boat, as Del Norte County's not alone in this fight to bring these wages up, and I encourage you to do everything you can to help the staff out and really go for it. We're going to have to go out on a limb to keep these employees, or we're just going to keep losing them. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you for that input, Sheriff. So I guess at this time, given that our represented bargaining groups, our CEO, department heads, and our sheriff are supportive of this, I'd go ahead and make that motion as read into the record.
And I will second that also, but I just want to clarify, all we're talking about right now is the ability for the roads department to hire somebody that's qualified higher than above the basic, right?
That's correct.
That's just as simple as what we're doing.
Yep.
Okay. Then yeah, I still second it.
Have a motion and a second. Pull the vote, please.
Supervisor Howard,
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey,
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. That brings us down to number 13, which is basically adopt and approve a side letter agreement between County of Del Norte and County of Del Norte Employees, SEIU Local 1021, to waive Section 412, Article 6 of the Del Norte County Employees Association, SEIU Memorandum of Understanding as proposed by the union, tentatively agreed to the county chief negotiating county officer, effective on the date to approve by the Board of Road Division Rand adjustments presented to the board July 23rd as requested by the county administrative officer.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have motion and a second. Any public comment?
Ouch. God dang it, Bigfoot. All right, listen. So when I look at this schedule here for raises, since when?
I'm going to ask you to hold until we get to that item. That this is not that item. That we have item number, I think it's 15. And when we get to that, if you want to address it then. Thank you.
Hi, Norma Williams, Chapter President, DNCEA SEIU 1021. Yeah, we proposed this mainly because of the fact that we want to ensure that the road workers do get the 10%. That does actually allow for more flexibility, because right now the way the contract states is that they would be within the new range, but at the lowest step. This way it allows to basically ensure and guarantee that they will get the appropriate wage increases that the department heads actually ask for. Even though this only applies to the road division, we will definitely be discussing it with your county team when we engage in negotiations, hopefully next month. But we do ask that you approve it, because this was our proposal. It was something that our executive board and our negotiation team both individually asked to be brought forward to your team, and after some discussion, they did agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Oh, sorry.
So basically, you're throwing out the step A, and you're allowing your department heads to determine whether a person should be hired at step A or step C. And this is some sort of a tool that can be randomly used by various department heads throughout the county. Is that what I'm understanding?
This is just for the road department. It allows
I
them
understand it's just for the road department.
to
but-
A, B, or C within the various steps. Yeah.
And then the sheriff's department has a similar arrangement.
Yes.
And the other departments in the county do not have that arrangement at this point, but they're likely to be negotiating that same opportunity.
DHSS does, no, not yet. But there are several departments. Most those kind of requests have to go through the board.
Okay. So you're basically creating a chaotic situation that each individual department head is going to have to weigh in on. And you're not going to have any kind of a uniformity unless your department heads get together and agree that you're going to chuck the A and the B step and start hiring everybody at the C step. Is that what I'm?
No.
Well, I mean, that's what's going to happen.
That's not what is to be happening. Yes. Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back for a vote, please.
Supervisor Howard,
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey,
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges, Chair Wilson.
Yes. Brings us to our legislative and budget issues. Consider miscellaneous legislative and budget matters pertinent to the county of Delaware. Authorize the chair to sign and send appropriate letters with respect to matters pending before the state and federal governments. Item number 14 is to discuss and take action pertaining to a special session board meetings subject to the Brown Act in order to conduct general fund budget workshops for the fiscal year 24-25 only in August 2024 prior to the board's consideration of the 2024 final adopted budget, or to discuss and take action pertaining to an addition in the step of an annual budget process under Title 10 of Delaware County Administrative Officer beginning in 24-25 to include special session board meetings in August of each year, followed by the approval of the recommended budget in the prior adopted budget and continued to upon approval of item number 1 or 2, and then 3, to discuss and provide direction to the budget team for drafting budget workshop guidelines to be provided to the general fund department heads, applicable fiscal staff, which is contingent upon the board approving them, and 2, would also include language adding into section the Title 10 Administrative Manual to reflect the annual budget workshops or conducted in August as requested by the board and presented by the County Administrative Officer and budget team. Neil, everything to add or say?
Nothing much, Chair. This is just an item that was directed at June 25th meeting to bring back to the board as part of the budget package that was brought forward. I believe it was item number 6. And you asked to bring back options for budget workshops for the general fund. And that's the item that's before you today.
Thank you. Comments?
Public comment? But I don't know your
Board.
what's your flow? Public comment first or S
Board comment, please.
comment? Oh, I'll go last. I want to hear what my colleagues.
Any comments? Board comments?
I was hoping to hear from the public first, but
Okay.
it's just me.
We can go public comment.
Okay, so when you guys are considering raises.
Again, way more 15.
No, I'm not going to do this again. This is the last time.
No.
So, yeah.
If you want to come up at 15, I'll be happy to listen to you. Otherwise, no.
You're not going to let me speak.
Not on this issue. If you want to talk about what we're
It's
talking about.
concerning the budget.
You want to, about
It's
budget
concerning
meetings?
the budget.
Okay, then let's go.
This is in the budget. Your hourly rates, whenever you go from step B to C, is 92 cents. That is not a raise. Not in today's standards at all. You guys need to reconfigure your whole budget on how you're going to pay your employees. $20 an hour is barely going to get anyone by these days. And when you give them an annual raise of 92 cents, that's a slap in the face. What is wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Why would you do that? Colusa County and Lassen County has the same population as Del Norte County. I highly suggest you look at what they're paying their employees and maybe reconfigure. Thank you, on the budget matter.
I take it we're addressing item number 14.
Yes, yes.
My concern is you're talking to Mr. Burns about the fact that the county should be involved in various topics at a very early stage, yet you're talking about doing these budget workshops in August where the development of the budget has occurred back in the spring. I don't see how much value having budget workshops in August when you're trying to develop a budget just prior to when you're going to pass the final version. So what use is an August time period for having budget workshops when they should be in the developmental process earlier in the year when you're talking about how you're going to spend your money, not in August where you've pretty much finalized how you're going to spend your money and it's basically for all practical purposes over and done with at that point. This is totally useless with regards to, any kind of potential public input, any kind of, employee input. It's over and done with by then. So, I don't see any value in this at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I basically have two comments, and they're pretty much directed at these two. First off, you've already talked about the fact that you are doing a wage study. They take a lot. I've done several. They take a lot of time, but they're comprehensive. They're supportive. You can come back and say, this is what's going on here, here, and here, compared to our population, et cetera, et cetera. You've tried to do a stopgap with your ABC, and I think that's unfortunate that you have to do that while you wait for this study, but at least something is being done in the meantime to help a few people who are grossly underpaid for the amount of security that they have on the job. So I wait for that. I'm waiting for that salary study. That should be very telling, and I'm sure it will help greatly. The second thing is a budget workshop. I asked for a budget committee when I first came here almost a year ago, and I'm accepting a budget committee, a budget workshop in lieu of that, because when you have a population that is not accustomed to doing budgeting, how are they possibly going to be included in the initial process of putting all these numbers. I'm a budget analyst for 50 years. It's not easy. What they're presenting to us is going to be very helpful. We still have time from August to October the 2nd to make changes to the final budget before the board adopts it. And that's exactly what we need, the opportunity to come in here, talk to department heads if necessary, ask questions of the board and department heads, get some responses back from them, make our recommendations. Whether they're accepted or not is, at least we have the opportunity to make those recommendations. I fully support the August, every year, an August budget workshop for the community so that they know they actually are part of the budget process. I hope that helps. Believe me, as a budget analyst, I'm telling you, it's not an easy thing. I spent 6 months every year doing nothing but working on the annual budget.
Thank you.
I was warned this morning by Waldorf and Statler to keep this brief, so I'm just going to go over this really quickly. Absolutely agree with PJ. When I go to House meetings and community meetings in Klamath and here in District 5, they absolutely love the things that you had to say and your input. Supervisor Howard, earlier today you asked about community and getting ideas and everything else. We have tremendous resources within our community, and PJ is being one of them. So I put together a petition to help support the board in making this decision to have annual budget hearings, and I had 38 respondents in support of that. Just going to read this really quickly here, that I'm here to show support for additional steps under Title 10 of the County Admin Manual to include special session board meetings starting in August of 24-25 budget. You'll find the petition attached, signed by our neighbors urging to institute annual hearings. These hearings are not merely procedural. They represent an opportunity for transparency and accountability. Annual budget hearings allow you to foster a deeper trust with those you serve, providing a platform where concerns for each department head and board member can be voiced. Ideas are exchanged and solutions proposed. Budget hearings will enhance your understanding of the diverse needs of each of the county departments, enabling you to make informed decisions, and will strengthen the community trust and confidence in your stewardship of our tax dollars. I ask each of you to consider the petition seriously and support the motion of adding an additional step under Title 10 to the County Admin Manual to include special board session meetings starting August of 24, and embracing this opportunity to foster a transparent process in our budget. Behind that letter is the petition that was signed on CARE 2 on Facebook, and then I've also included the comments in this so that you can read what the community members said and the names of those who signed the petition. And then I did screenshots of the comments from the Facebook petition as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, excuse me, rolling down to item number 2, under Title 10 of the County Administrative Manual, beginning in fiscal year 24-25, to include special session board meetings in August of each year following the approval of the recommended budget and prior to the adopted budget. And then again, down to number 2, would also include language adding a section to Title 10 of the Administrative Manual to reflect annual budget workshops to be concluded in August as requested by the board and presented by the CAO.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments?
I would love to have a discussion about this before we make a decision, if that's okay with the chair.
Absolutely.
I think it's best that we've taken a pretty firm stance in the past not to have this, and because there's been quite a bit of public comment over the last couple of years that our processes aren't transparent enough, they're not accountable enough, and now it appears that we're moving in a direction that potentially has a budget workshop that at least in the past, I've felt very strongly that was a duplicative process. And for me, also eating up a lot of staff time in a process that gets us to a point in August where we could actually bring department heads in front of us during our hearings and ask these very type questions. So it's pretty much the same timeline, in my opinion, that we're already on, and we do have a mechanism in August that allows for those discussions to take place. I guess my concern with this right now is under our current policies and procedures manual, we go through a process that essentially starts in April for our department heads and our budget team that we have authorized to dive deep into coming in with a crystal ball type suggestion, the best they can, with a June presentation to us to approve our draft budget, which essentially starts us on the new fiscal year. In doing so, that's their best guess until our county audit controller could essentially look forward, hopefully in July at the latest, with the idea of really what revenue is left to come in and what expenses essentially are left to put towards last year's budget, which gives us a good idea how we're moving forward. I'm not sure there's a lot of input that could take place earlier from the board that would allow our department heads that have essentially, some of us have been here close to 30 years, to give us a better idea what's going on to make a better decision. And then we have this weird time in July where we're waiting for all the numbers to come in order for us to make our best decisions. So that next step that would essentially take place in August, which is being suggested by item 14, is to have a more transparent process as these public hearings begin to roll out. I'm just wondering, again, like I've stated in the past, why this particular mechanism for the board is necessary when we do have a public hearing process and we can ask our department heads to come for us if there are concerns. So I'd like to hear from the board on that, especially after listening to a lot of the lengthy discussions from the June 26th meeting.
I actually have to agree with Supervisor Howard. This has been happening this way for many years. There's been, there's very little, I guess I'm looking at this that was just given to us, which is a survey of people wanting this to happen, which is great. And I know it's just a quick, it doesn't give a full footprint, but out of 27,000 people, only 36 people thought that this needed to be happening. So I'm kind of concerned about that as well. And so with the budget hearing process, I'm also curious, what's the difference? And what's the benefit of doing it this way?
So what I'd like to say is, have you ever watched the city present their budget or do their workshops? Have you ever tuned in when the city does that? No.
I've actually participated in the past, long before I was on this board.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. So just because we get a budget and it has all these numbers in it and all these things, the average citizen doesn't have the wherewithal to process all those, to analyze all those. An open budget hearing allows them to come in, allows us to be this full transparent process. And while our process right now is transparent, it doesn't inform. It just provides a bunch of numbers and that none of us really understand it either. And I think that's a very fair statement. We need to be able to start opening up our books and having conversations with the public. They're our boss. These people are our bosses. And if we can't tell them, well, this is how we're spending our money, or if we can't get their input on how we want to spend their taxpayer dollars, we're not doing our jobs. We're not listening. Okay, well, if the public could just let me finish. The current system is completely legal. It's completely above board. But why is it that we can't be like 95% of the other counties in Del Norte County? Why we can't do what, as I was just at the national conference, with 95% of the nation does, has open meetings, has an ability for the public to come in department by department and say, Here's our projects. Here's what we were able to complete last year. Here's what we didn't complete because we didn't have the staffing or the funding to show exactly what it is that we need to be able to have done. Just giving us a packet and saying, here's our budget, that's not informing the public. And so I'm strongly in favor of the budget hearings. Would I like to see something in the spring? Absolutely. I'd like to be able to have the board sit down with the 5 of us because, as you know, we often can't sit down with the 5 of us unless it's a public meeting to be able to kind of guide where this budget is going to go. But instead, what we do is we get it to us. The budget team gets all the information. They decide what they want to bring forward to us. We don't get the rejects. We don't get the stuff that doesn't make it through. We don't get the reclassifications that somebody brought forward and then decided, no, you know what, we want to change that. We don't get to see that. In order for us to make informed decisions, we should see it all. We should be part of the discussion. And we're simply not part of the discussion. So I'm a strong advocate for budget meetings. I'm a strong believer that we work for this public. And this is what I think we need to do in order to take a step in the right direction to regain public trust with what we're doing with their taxpayer dollars.
Endless. I'm Supervisor Starkey, I'm glad you did make the statement specific to the transparency of the current process and the legality of it. It is on. The processes that we do have in place have functioned quite well for us over a number of years. And yes, we do work for the citizens of this community. That is absolutely 100% factual and true. But they've put us, as I've made in previous years' statements, they've elected us to have that authority to create budgets annually that we function by. And then we, through our policies and procedures, have granted the authority of forming a budget to our department heads and then also to our CAO and budget team to bring forward a package for us in June that we can make informed decisions on. I guess getting down, and I've said this in the past many times, getting down into the nuances or the weeds of how a department head would like to form that budget based on the amount of money that they believe they have in their purse for an operating year. I'm not necessarily sure that that's a good role for a board of supervisor like us to be involved in until we have all the information in front of us, which I believe we do by the end of July. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you've presented a good discussion for us to consider, and there's a lot of reasons that specific counties do that, and there's a lot of reasons that other counties don't. And a lot of it really comes down to Siskiyou, for instance, just over the hill.
What I'm asking is, what are the good reasons why counties do it?
It's a specifically efficiency issue and staffing issue is what I heard is the most important reason. We're not fully staffed in a lot of these areas, so distracting from the amount of time our budget team or others put into these, what I think are well thought out processes leading up to our June adoption period of a draft fiscal year budget for the next operating period, I think are well thought out. And there's reasons that some of our department heads who've been in these positions for quite some period of time know more than us about these processes. So you don't think the department heads should know more than us?
We should be as informed. We're the ones that are making the decision.
Okay.
So absolutely, they're going to know more than us. But we absolutely, before making any decision, I'm not going to just say that I trust this person. I need to understand it. I need to know the pros and cons. I didn't mean to interrupt you, so I do apologize for that.
It's a fair discussion, and I'm glad we're having this discussion because I do believe that the department heads have gone through a process to get to this level, that if we do have question on why something didn't get implemented or happen, we have that August period of time in order to do so. And I don't think interjecting ourselves in those meetings prior to June 26th is helpful for this board until the department has a good idea of what their purse looks like and what they can spend money on and where the revenues are coming from. But that's just my opinion.
Well, I'm a little confused. So this is for August. So this is after they've gone through the recommended budget and before the final budget. It's for us to really take a deep dive into the departments. I want to know statistical stuff. And I can give you an example, the jail. How many bookings were in the jail? Do all of those bookings, and how many officers do we have for that? How many staff do they have to process that? I'd like that statistical information so that when we make decisions that about the staffing and about the various things, that we're making an informed decision and we're not simply just making based on numbers. I think there's a lot more to the budget than just numbers. And I think we have to look at statistics. How many roads were able to be paved last year? How many miles of roads? You know, how many grants did the grant person oversee and review? I mean, those are real important information that as a board who's approving this budget really needs to have that background information.
What part of that, you've made a lot of statements, and I want to make sure we stay in that realm. What part of that process can we not at any point in time as a board direct staff to bring us that information?
Without it being permanently in the administration manual, we're going to see what happened last year. And last year, the departments came in, some, not every single department, some just chose not to come in, and gave us just kind of this brief overview, right? But it wasn't permanent. It wasn't all departments. I think that we need to embed this into our practices. I think that this is fair to the public to watch a board of supervisors operate with a practice that informs the community.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know if it's an information gap that we're being presented, which is clearly, I think, a lot of the reasons that you want to have these discussions on a more general level at separate meetings. If it's an information gap, there's nothing, I guess, at this time that prevents us from going to those department heads and pulling for that information.
And then in what mechanism do I then, because I will do that, I will meet with every single department head for a day between then and now. What mechanism do I have to inform the public? If there's not an open discussion, what mechanism do I have in order to be able to bring that forward to the public? I'll hold town hall meetings if that's what you're suggesting.
That is not what I'm suggesting. There's a lot of mechanisms. The most common one, which obviously you traditionally use, is to bring it back either in the board report or ask the chair to place an item on our schedule, which obviously happens quite frequently with some of the areas we want to focus. So I'm still not sure what changes, but at this point in time, we have two items to consider. One, which Supervisor Short and you have seconded, which works towards item 2, the or piece, or item 1, which is to just take a 1-year snapshot at this and give it a trial run to see what it looks like. And I guess my last question, since I've taken a lot of airtime here, is for the CEO. In doing so, what is the anticipated workload on departments and the CEO's office to have this next step in August? Was that previously discussed in a meeting that I might have missed, or what do we anticipate?
And also, hang on, before you answer that, also, could you add into there your what this meeting or hearing or workshop would look like what would go on at this, so we have an understanding of that as well.
Okay, Supervisor Howard, you first. Honestly, I don't know. It would be a brand new process for all of us, so I don't know what the workload would be for us. We did something similar a couple years back with Supervisor Starkey and Supervisor Maston. I don't think it was a massive amount of work. Our budget's already developed by then, and so the printouts are available. If we get questions beforehand, it'd be even less work because it's more helpful, because then we're not just sitting here going back and forth answering questions we weren't prepared for. A lot of it takes time. As PJ mentioned, this is a very complicated process. The budget is extremely complicated, and there are very few people in my experience that actually understand a budget completely. So it's hard for me to say exactly how much time it would be additional special sessions scheduled for the board, and we were planning on doing 4-hour sessions, so it's not an overload to the departments, not an overload to the board or staff, and do as many as we needed to in order to get through the general fund departments. Honestly, I couldn't say specifically how much work that would be. For departments that have multiple departments or department heads, it's going to be a lot more work than somebody who has one department. And sorry. The way this changes the process is just as I stated, it's special session board meetings specific for budget workshops. Typically right now what we have under the government code, which Supervisor Starkey alluded to, is that the budget is available to the public prior to the opening of a public hearing, which is not to exceed 14 days. And during that time, any member of the public can review the entire budget, submit any questions they have, submit any suggestions that they have to the clerk of the board. That is the public hearing process we're currently under. This would actually be specific meetings held by the board for the public. That's how the process would change.
So would the process be department heads would come in with a similar presentation as they did this last year, or would it be more of a one-on-one conversation? And then if there's no members of the public here, is it just us having a conversation with the department head? Is that what it is?
Yes, if you didn't get public participation, then it would be just you guys and the department head. And that's actually what item 3 is on the agenda, is for you guys to kind of give us some direction. As I stated, this is brand new to all of us, so what you would expect out of this budget process or the budget workshop process. What happened previously was there was a table set up here in front. Supervisor Starkey and Supervisor Maston sat up there. The department head came forward with their budget, and Supervisor Maston and Supervisor Starkey highlighted certain line items, asked certain questions. Was there anything operationally that you didn't get through the budget process? Things like that. So just kind of more of an open conversation. How detailed you want to get is up to you guys. It really is. So we're looking for direction on that also, if you approve item 1 or 2 today.
So, just another comment for you, Mr. Lopez. During those 2 processes, the budget workshops that Supervisor Starkey and Masson did, and then after that, the budget presentations, I remember you making a comment to me that that the presentations were more burdensome, that most of the department heads favored the budget workshops. I know personally I do too, but that is true, that you kind of got that feeling from the department heads?
It is true that between the 2 of them, the presentations were much more burdensome, correct? I don't think, like I said, it's new to all of us. A lot of us have been here for so many years that the current process is so entrenched into us that we're just used to that. So it's hard to speak on how something new would happen or how it would proceed. But yes, definitely the presentations, I think, got a little off track from the budget. This is supposed to be budget focused, and a budget workshop would be more budget focused.
Thank you. I just had a couple more things, Mr. Chairman. Leaving a North Coast EMS JPA meeting with Rex Bone down in Humboldt County, he mentioned that, I got to get going. I got budget workshops to go to, and I asked him, you guys doing open budget workshops? And you'd have to know Rex, but he answered, "Oh hell yeah! How else are you going to get that transparency for the public?" And it was just really matter of fact from Rex, and it was just kind of struck me that it really made a lot of sense. Another thing I wanted to mention is I value what Supervisor Starkey said, is that there is information, but then there's also knowledge to be gained from that, and I think Supervisor Borges and I gained some of that when we went and talked to our DA investigator. He showed us some past cases, and he asked us if we recalled, did you recall this or that happening? And we did, and he said, "Do you remember that not going to court?" And yeah, there was kind of, some concern about that, and of course, the person that gets blamed is our DA. That darn DA, refused to prosecute this or that. It comes around now and again. Well, at that point, AC showed us the report that was given from the law enforcement agency that was the sole document that they were going to have to convict this person on. And it was, I'm not saying this to be to come down on the sheriff's department or the police department, but it obviously showed that a rookie cop had done this report, and it was absolutely not up to par. So it didn't tell us a story about the DA. It told us a story about the sheriff's department or the police department, that we had some serious personnel problems there because we only have rookie cops working in those areas. So it was informative in that way to me, and I think that we could garner knowledge like that from these open budget hearings and asking these department heads how they are doing in their department, what their struggles are, not just how many pencils are you using, how many notepads are you using. We don't care about that. You know, getting into those kind of weeds is not what I'm envisioning here with these budget workshops. I'm hoping to learn something from the department heads about their department and learn what their struggles are and how we can be more informed and work with them better. So that's why I made the motion.
The only thing I'm not sure exactly where the heck that came from, because again, what we're talking about is budget and a budget workshop. And if we move forward on a budget workshop, it is just that, just budget. We're not talking about, finding out, the difficulties within, the lack of resources within a particular agency. What we are talking about is how they're spending their money and where their resources are going. As we're going forward in this issue, what we have, what we've just started this year with our strategic plan is no longer the tail wagging the dog. It's trying to get all of that information, and it came from the public, came from department heads, came from board members, putting together a strategic plan on what we wanted to see done and what our priorities were, so that when they go to actually the budget meetings that we are currently conducted, that is front and forward in their processing, that they know what it is expected, that the board has directed them towards our priorities. And this is a brand new process. This is something that we are just in the process of starting. We have not ever had a strategic plan before. We've never, ever put our opinions before the budget was set. And so as we go forward, we have to be very cautious that we're not circumventing our own new processes that we're putting in place, that we have established this thing, and we need to allow those priorities established through the strategic plan to direct and give a roadmap for our department heads as they sit in those meetings and are prioritizing where our budget is going and what our priorities are. And this is the first year that we've ever done that. And yet, we're having discussions that are basically trying to bypass some of that process. I have no problem in having a public hearing and workshop discussing in August when it is actually going to mean something. If you discuss this in the spring or June, it's perfectly useless, because we don't even know where we're going to be until we have that mid-year budget come out and we are heading towards our final. And this year we have to be extremely cautious, because I'll guarantee you that the state is holding back exactly what they're going to really do to us, because they don't want to hear the complaints, the yelling and the shouting until the last minute. And so we're likely to find exactly where they're going to cut for their shortfalls at the last minute before the budget actually gets settled in Sacramento, and that's going to impact us directly. And so as we have those kinds of meetings in August, they're more relevant. We have an understanding what our cost savings was from the previous year. We have an idea of what capital projects, improvements, and other dollars may be coming and where our shortfalls are. We have that better understanding in August. And so it is a much more appropriate time for us to conduct those types of sessions. I'm not I'm not into really moving forward and changing title and doing all this stuff, making it a permanent situation, especially when we're just, if we do this, this is going to be the first building block. And so we may need to change these time frames. We may need to find it's not appropriate in August, may need to be later, maybe to be earlier. And so to codify it now, I think is not wise. I think it's something that we need to look at and see how it's best fleshed out before we, make it a permanent decision as to what we're going to do. I think absolutely public hearings are a public workshops on the budget is a good decision. It allows the public to come in, even though they have other opportunities. Every time we have a budget, they have that opportunity to come and speak, and they have, and they've voiced their questions to us about the budget. So the opportunities are there. Whether they make themselves available of them, that's a different question altogether. And so, I'm not in favor of permanently addressing this. I am in favor of having such a session and directing the staff to put together a recommendation on how this August meeting would be conducted and in what fashion it would be made, whether it's a full board, whether it's 2 members of the board. I think the interaction and listening and hearing from the public and answering their questions, which largely is what happens. They ask questions about how we're spending our money and why it's addressed in this particular manner inside our budgets. And so having those opportunities to answer those questions, I think is not an unwise decision, although, again, how that is going to be framed out and which is the best vehicle to do that forward, I think that's something that, needs to be, we've tried several different methods of bringing forward our department heads at various meetings so that they could, and I think for the most part, for them, it was a waste of time. As I know, for me, if I have questions of our department heads, if I have any questions about their budget, I just go see them. I answer those questions. I get those resolved well beforehand so that I know what and why it's being done the way it is. And that's why I was elected. I was elected by the public so I could go and do these things and answer these questions and have these concerns and address them. And if I don't have the answers, then if it doesn't resolve, then I voice my objection here on the dais. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so I could clarify some of your thought process here. I believe what I heard, and can you please confirm that, are you advocating then for item 1? So just a preliminary look at this, just tiptoeing into this for just this fiscal year, or are you not supporting either item 1 or 2? I guess that's the clarity I'm seeking right now.
I would be supportive of item 1. How and in what methodology, again, that it's done, whether it's a workshop with the full board or whether it's a workshop with just 2 members of the board and the public, like the ones that were done by Sue and Maston and Valerie Starkey this last time, or whether it is something totally different. But I think, having those brought back for the board, making a recommendation on how that would be done in August. Again, we've tried several methods. Some of them I don't think worked well. They didn't have the desired respect, or didn't have the desired outcome that I was hoping for. But these focus strictly on the budget, may have the outcome that the public is requesting from us at this time.
Okay, I guess if either item 1 or item 2 is currently motioned by Supervisor Short and seconded by Supervisor Starkey, whether or not item 1 or 2 move forward today or none of them move forward, results in potentially us giving guidance to the CAO and others in item 3 on what that might look like. So I think, me personally, I think we've beat this up enough. Whether or not we move forward with item 1 or 2, I guess is where we stand right now before we even get to item 3. So I do want to clarify. There's a second motion on the floor at this point in time.
I do want to clarify something if I can real quick. Sorry for interrupting you, Supervisor Howard. Both of these items are special session board meetings with the full board that fall under the Brown Act. It's not a ad hoc or committee or 2x2 or anything like that. It's full board.
Public comment? One more?
I just want to say first, you're right about the strategic plan. That was something that I was very happy to see because the board now is giving direction to all the department managers and the administration about what they want. And that's the critical part to starting doing a budget. That's what you need, the goals and visions and policies and all of those things that came out in the strategic plan to even start a budget. So hooray for that. Second, I think that I'd accept item 1 to get us started. I think you'll find that the public would be involved and happy to come. And at least you'd get a vision of what it's like, and then we can go from there. And hopefully next year we'll can make a motion to do something permanent and maybe make some adjustments to whatever we do this year. But the budget hearing doesn't work the way you operate it. If you want to do a budget hearing and then spend the 2 weeks between till the next budget hearing, at the end of the budget hearing, to actually have a budget hearing where you're having a workshop and people come and make comments, that's kind of late in the game because then they would have to be making adjustments to the budget. August is a good time. It's given fiscal services, the auditor controller's office, time to get pretty close to the year-end numbers so that he's got that year-to-date, not just the budget, but the year-to-date, because I work on that, and then I project from there. But even still, having that year-to-date as close as we can gives everybody a better idea of what you're actually doing. You've got 2 years prior actual, you've got this year's actual. So August is a good time because he's been able to put that together. So I'm here to support a one-time shot, number 1, as a test for August. Please. And thank you for the strategic plan. And you saw how well that worked. You had the public here, they made comments, they sent comments in, and that's exactly what would happen with a budget workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it afternoon yet? I have a clarification question for the paper. For clarity. I heard Supervisor Short make a dual motion of 1 and 2, combining the two. Is that what I heard correctly?
No, he just, it was on 2.
Well, one is a standalone August 24, and the other one is a continuation of that. Is that what I heard in the motion, seconded by Starkey?
My motion was 2 and 2.
Oh, 2 and 3, and
Sorry,
not 1.
2 and 3, yeah.
Okay, so the motion is that, are you considering taking a separate vote on 2 and 3, so there is no motion for 1? I just want to understand that there's the clarification on this at this point. It's 2 and 3 only, and it's a 1 vote that you're going to take in moments. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you.
No, Supervisor Starkey clarified that was 2 and the second part of 3. So including the language in Title 10 was part of my motion. Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Sam.
Quick question. You form a budget and it's finalized in October, and yet over the course of the year, we find expenditures out of that budget that the public wonders how in the heck they ever got approved as expenditures when the budget doesn't really define how those monies are going to be spent. So I'm wondering how we can get some clarification when you form a budget at the beginning of the year, and then over the course of the year, you spend money within those portions of the budget that we have no idea, no transparency as to how the process came about that you approved those expenditures. That's a lot of the problem that I'm having with how the county spends their budgetary money. They, as a member of the public, we suddenly in a board meeting find out we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on something out of a budgetary fund that was agreed to in October, that in no way, shape, or form is vital to the community whatsoever, but yet you're approving spending that money 6 months down the line after the budget's passed. That's not transparency when you're talking about forming a budget to account for taxpayer money, because in August and in October even, we have no idea how you're going to spend that money in each budget segment, even if you have a strategic plan, because who makes that plan? Who makes those priorities? Where's the development up to the process of you making decisions? Where does that all occur? How do you determine whether, the items you put in your strategic plan as vital are all that important to the community? There are so many questions about how your budget is developed that there's no transparency in it whatsoever, because you end up over the course of the year spending money on things that at the beginning of the year the public has no idea you're going to spend the money on that in that fashion. Thank you.
Thank you.
CAO Lopez, can you just clarify for me? On item number 14, I was under the impression 1 was a section by itself and 2 was a section by itself. They keep mentioning section 3. Am I misinterpreting that?
1 and 2 are separate from each other, which is why there's a or on the item.
No, I agree with that, but I was just wondering.
Let me finish, Mike.
Okay.
3 is only necessary if 1 or 2 is approved.
Okay, gotcha.
Otherwise, 3 is not necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I went to the first budget workshop we had, and I was appalled. You guys need to have this, because it was there that I found out our sheriff's department had a 27-year-old computer system that had not been updated, and that's outrageous. We've got safety security issues for our county. So it's important that we have these workshops, because things come out that need to be known and need to be fixed and not just passed under the table. And for years, it's been passed under the table. So that's why it's important that you have these workshops. Thank you.
So I'd just like to point out, as much as I trust the process, and
I'm sorry, you spoke on this issue. Well, you have to address afterwards. Yeah. Okay, this is not an open forum.
okay. Anyway, I'll just make my quick comment, and then hopefully we can take a vote and put this to bed. As much as I trust the process, I do agree that public clarity and being able for them to understand it as well as everyone else, I am agreeing with you guys. But I would like to advocate, if we're going to make this decision to do the public hearings, let's just make it a permanent thing and do it from here on out, and then we'll perfect it as we go, so we don't have to keep discussing this.
Thank you. And dovetailing off of Kylie's concern, do you need me to modify my motion to just do 2 first? Do I need to do that?
No.
Or, okay. All right.
No, we're good. I was just confused.
Okay.
So Supervisor Borges, can I ask a question? You're supporting item 2?
I am. I'm supporting the, let's do these public hearings, workshops, whatever they're called in here anymore, and let's just put it in the manual. We'll do it every year. It'll just become a normal thing, and we'll perfect it as we go. And if we can make small adjustments along the way if need be, but we've spent so much time discussing this and the presentations, and let's just pinpoint this down to something that's useful to the public and move forward.
Thank you.
And I understand we want to get to the vote, and time's precious for everybody. And I guess I'm in a position, if we're going to have to decide between 1 or 2 at this point in time, is to really see how this process works out. There's a lot of nuances here that we just don't know yet because we haven't had these processes. I think it's prudent for us to consider potentially item 1 as a test run to see what our impacts are before we monument this in our policies and procedures. And that's just my initial thought, and hoping for potentially some reconsideration of this before we walk down this path permanently. We just don't know. But
We have a motion. Go ahead and poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Howard,
no.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges.
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
No. Motion passed. That brings us down to
Chair Wilson, just really quick, please. Item number 3 was what I kind of spelled out to the board as far as the department head being here, similar to what happened in 2 years ago. That's the process we're looking at, so I can make sure the department heads are informed about what to expect. It would be a similar process.
Yeah, that's on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it. My channel is YouTube. No, I don't know. I was trying to be funny. What we did, and I think it was helpful, is that we were just able to go by the budget and ask questions, like in your department allotment for $6 million, what are the projects earmarked in there? It's asking those sorts of questions. What's your staffing level, statistics, that sort of thing. So it won't be anything they won't know off the top of their head.
Okay. Fair enough.
I apologize. That was my reason for the questions about the difference between the two. That was my intent, was to have the hearings like Supervisor Starkey and Maston did. That was what I had in my head.
CAO Lopez, for minutes clarification, do we need Supervisor Short just to clarify in the motion that it needs to be similar to that, or does that not need to be included in the minutes?
It would be helpful if you don't mind revising that to make your motion for item number 2, and with 3, given the direction to the staff to be similar to the budget workshops that were held in 22-23. Is that correct?
So I could make that motion, certainly.
And I'll second that motion.
Got a motion and a second to make the meetings similar to the last workshops. Any public comment on that?
Not the last ones, the ones prior.
Yes.
Yeah.
August. Yep.
Oh, Sam's not going to be here. Can I
motion and a
change-
second.
can I
Any
change
comment?
the month?
Pull the vote.
Supervisor Howard,
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges.
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. That brings us to 15. And this is approve range adjustments to road division classifications that are requested by the Department Director of Community Development Department as recommended by the County Administrative Officer as attachment A, and 2, approve the revisions attachment road division classification job descriptions as requested by the Director of the Community Development Department as recommended by the County Administrative Officer, and 3, authorize human resources to complete all necessary administrative tasks and reflect any action upon the board requested by the County Administrative Officer. Or B, per board direction, June 25th, 24, review and consider department memo, proposed revised staffing chart, classification, job descriptions, range adjustments submitted by the county budget team in April 2024 This proposal is not recommended by the Director of the County Development or the County Administrative Officer. Any public comment?
When you try to make special provisions for one particular department, you end up creating an enormous amount of difficulty for your budget team going forward. If you're going to do something for one department, you better be thinking about doing it for every department. When you're talking about basically eliminating step A and B and starting at C, you better start thinking about doing that for not only every department, but for every employee that's employed by the county. So you've better be thinking along those terms instead of piecemealing something together. Thank you.
I'm back. In regards to this particular item, as we had told you on June 25th meeting that we were going to go ahead, since you opened the door, we decided to walk on in and see what the house looked like inside. So we basically did that. We met with your team. We asked questions about what happened with the April 8th memo. We actually went ahead and even met. They did present us with a proposal, which you're being asked to approve today, or at least one of them. And we met with the road division. Actually, we met with the road crew twice. We met with them on the 15th, and then we met with them on the 18th. They did agree with the proposal that your county team did present to us, knowing, of course, that naturally, as I've been telling you, each and every single time these targeted budget items come up during the course of the year, that what's good for one is good for all. Targeted wage increases, we're never going to say no to those. We're always going to approve those. But you have to understand that what's good for some is good for all. And I understand some will argue one area may have more funding than the other area. Health and Human Services can argue the same thing. Other departments can argue the same thing. But bottom line is here, as far as your employees are concerned, that don't mean a damn thing. All they care about is what they make, what they earn, what they take home. You have a recruitment and retention problem. You have it at roads. You have it all over. And not just by employees that we represent, but by the other groups that are represented as well. But I don't represent them. But I can just speak only for my people. You want to staff up, then you're going to have to treat us with dignity and respect. You want to staff up, then you're going to have to negotiate with us in good faith. We are always, like we told your team, we will come to the table to work with you in good faith to resolve these issues. In all areas, not just wages. But you have to do the same, and you have to show us that you're willing to do the same. You want to staff up, then you're going to have to pay all of us, and I do mean all of us, the wages that we deserve. We approved A. We told your team, the road crew also approved that as well, because we followed the process. We're asking you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I want to address the problem. I used to be county roads, and they need to be stepped up on their pay. All the hazards, road hazards that they go through, winter stuff, they need more money. We're out there on the roads. You drove over. Right now, they're understaffed. I know they have budget for it because they're getting SB, whatever that one money, which comes out of your gas tax.
Problem is, I don't know what the problem is. HR, they're slow in getting people hired. They go elsewhere. I mean, a month, 2 months. I know a couple of guys. You have roads right now. They're in dire need and they're hazards. I'm from Klamath. We are well, I think we're kind of much left out, Mr. Wilson.
Absolutely.
And I've had a call into you, but I never got it. But you're busy here trying to do this, but I need a call. So you got fire hazards right now because they're not mowing. You got guardrails that have weeds 4 or 5 feet over. There are spots that you can't even see the stop sign. And it's shameful for me to see that. So, anyway, I've barked enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Anna Porter. I work at Public Health. Hi, Renelle. This is my boss, but you're my big boss. I just want to give you an example. We have a new hire who's just came on in taking the job. She lost her HUD, she lost her SNAP, and she's now living paycheck to paycheck. I'm here to represent her. And then on a good note, the health fairs this weekend, you guys are all welcome. I'd love to have you, and I think it's a great opportunity to meet our public people that are here serving us. Our vendors, I'm sure we can find a way to help fix the problem at the senior center. Just in case you want to come, I'll send you all invites. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
So I have a few things, if I could just touch upon them. First and foremost, I just want this community, I want the workers to know that the discussion here is about roads. It's about the infrastructure, the physical roads of this community. If the auditor controller's office were the ones who was responsible for repairing those roads and maintaining those roads, I'd be advocating for the auditor's controller's office to get those wages. This is something that we've been discussing as a board for 3.5 years that I've been on this board. This particular department has been grossly and chronically understaffed. So in the last couple weeks, I've heard from a lot of you, and I appreciate it. I want you to know I appreciate all of your comments, good and bad. I got one comment from staff that's saying that, you know what, roads are not in that dire of a condition right now. We've got roads that are in pretty good shape. When I was elected, I learned just how horrible the conditions at the jail were. And as we dove deeper into the jail, we found that years of neglect and failed maintenance had caused the building to require a $10 million facelift. And that's as of right now, $10 million. Thanks to Mr. Burns and the federal government, we got a $3.1 million award toward that, and AB 109 and other state-issued funding was able to come up with $1.5 million. We're still not even halfway there of what we need to play catch-up on a building or an infrastructure that we let deteriorate to a degree. Right now, with roads not being as bad as people say they are, we have a responsibility of this board of supervisors is not in charge of the wages. I agree. I mean, that's our budgeting team, our union team. But we have to be responsible for the actual infrastructure of these buildings. That is our responsibility. And when problems come and they're presented before us about how we need to fix this, we need to take a bold step. In 2017, I was in this room. I wasn't on the board. I wasn't even involved in politics. And I watched the director of the California Transportation Commission grill Director Kunstl. And Mr. Daniels, you were there too. And for a half hour, you guys were asked, how many miles of roads do we have? How much have you chip sealed? Why have you not chip sealed more? All the obstacles, because of the funding that the state has given down, they wanted you to address what it is, why you couldn't get done what needed to get done. Last week, an article in Politico, that's my go-to, Gavin Newsom decided to take back $10 million from San Diego for a homeless project because they weren't moving fast enough. They weren't spending the money like he directed them to do. As the state, as Supervisor Wilson has indicated several times, as the state starts to tighten their belt, they're going to start looking at the funding that's going out. And they're going to tighten their belt. And if they go to community and see that we are not getting the work done, we're not spending the money that they gave us, there's a real potential that that's going to derail any efforts that we have. So my second point is that this board, in past meetings, it says that Supervisor Short and I have blown up this whole process. One thing that I want to say that this board and previous boards, as well as staff and the public bemoan, is that this state imposes upon us a one-size-fits-all. We get so mad at the state because one size is supposed to fit all. They don't take into consideration our unique issues, our different funding streams, the problems that even other rural communities don't have, like this rural community has. So by trying for us to address individual departments' vacancy rates with a one-size-fits-all approach, or to address all of the vacancy rates with a one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work. We need to model, this board needs to model what we've bemoaned. We need to take a good hard look at each department, restructure what we can, cut the fat where we can, work on solutions that might include pay raises. It might include restructuring. It might include alternating hours. But it's our job, as the ones protecting the infrastructure, to actually look department by department to see what we can do. One size fits all should be for COLAs. I agree with you, because that's a number that applies across the workforce. One size fits all for COLAs makes sense, because that is based on the inflation. That's based on those things. But when we have broken departments with chronic vacancy rates, we need to go in and fix what we can. Not all jobs are created equal. Some jobs require education, some require a skill set. Roads requires a very unique skill set. They operate heavy equipment. They operate that on uneven terrain. They operate that in the middle of the night when they get called out because there's landslides. Road jobs require skills for construction. It requires knowledge of construction techniques. It's a labor-intensive job which cannot really be compared to any other job class in SEIU as it stands right this minute. My third point, I'm almost done, is succession planning. For the last 3.5 years as a supervisor, one of the struggles that we faced, that this board has faced, has been discussing succession planning. If we look at department by department and really evaluate the need of succession planning in each department, roads is pretty high up on the list for necessity. If I was to compare it, and I was really trying when I was preparing this to think, okay, what department do I address that isn't going to be offensive and come back on me, but it probably still will. But I compared it to admin, all right? It's a high-level job that requires real good critical thinking skills and an education, and Mr. Lopez does a fabulous job in that role. And we have Mr. Hooper, who's been in his role for the last 2 years, who's there to kind of monitor and mirror everything else that's going on. But the difference with admin compared to roads is that Mr. Lopez and Mr. Hooper can rely heavily on documents and policy to help guide them. There's an admin manual, there's a county government code. And when we had our state of emergency, there was a blueprint lined out exactly what they needed to do to reference. And if they didn't know, they had state officials that they could call. Roads is any skilled laborer job. You can't watch a YouTube video before you go out and have to clear a landslide in the middle of the night on a sloping hillside. We need them to be skilled, Currently, the staff in this department, they're not senior staff. They're all relatively new. Less than 7 years, I think, is the majority of the staff. Without being staffed fully up, they can't go out and learn the skills because we just cannot get the jobs done. When we have our yearly evaluations with Ms. Kunstl, there's a list of all the projects that are proposed and a list of all the projects that we couldn't get to because we just didn't have the staff. Past superintendents, we heard from Mr. Daniels today, and I appreciate that. But Mr. Daniels was trained by Mr. Perry and Mr. Babbage. And so he was able to pass that on to the very few people that he could, but they're now gone because they had to go get higher wages, which is totally understandable. I believe that this board needs to leave our infrastructure in better condition than we found it. And we need to make sure that succession planning is achievable in this department. And I'm going to end with this. I know this has caused a lot of problems, that the proposal presented by the assistant department head, whether or not that's claimed to now have been authorized or not, and I don't need to get into that, but it was a real solution. It was not a Band-Aid. He took into consideration the obligation that we have to the state reporting. It stepped outside the one-size-fits-all approach. It took into consideration a special skill set needed for these positions, and it took a real stab at succession planning so that we, this board, can leave the infrastructure in better conditions than when we found it. That is my advocacy for option B. I understand that's not a popular option, but I just want to say that I did the assessment, and option A, which is being presented by the director, to go with option B, it's $40,000 more a year because they're eliminating 2 positions and adding 1 shop foreman back in. If we were to even modify that further and have the road superintendent, instead of a 62, be a 59, we can reduce that amount to $25,000 more than what's proposed in option A. And that's going to be my advocacy because, again, not for the raises, for the roads, for this community, for what we're charged with doing is to make sure that we have public safety and we protect the infrastructure. Thank you.
Any other comment?
So Supervisor Starkey, I fully agree with you on the wages and the skill sets and everything, almost everything you've said. But I cannot agree with step B. The main reason is there's a process, it's a procedure, there's a chain of command, and that went completely out of it and around it. We have policies in place that everyone must follow. It'd be like in the police field or the whatever. I mean, you're going around your supervising officer, and we just can't allow that. So I cannot support option B. I know I asked to bring it back, but I just wanted to see what everybody was talking about. But it didn't follow the proper steps. So I can't support you on that. I do fully support that they should be paid higher, and I will agree with option A. My question, though, is currently looking at the current budget, and maybe you know this answer or someone else, in the roads department annual budget, currently as it sits, is, I believe it's like 4.9 million income. And if they're fully staffed at the current wages, their expenses jumps up to 5.6. So they're going in the negative. So what is if we get them to fully staff, and that's before this wage increase, what's the end plan there? I mean, there is excess money in the reserve fund, but that'll dwindle fast when you start burning an extra $1 million a year.
Yeah. Out of fairness, the proposal in A is only $100,000 more than what they've budgeted for. If we were to go to B, it's $140,000 more than what they budgeted for. They budget for it every year, so it's not as if they budget for it and then it's salary savings. So it's not as if we don't budget for it and have that revenue coming in. They've budgeted for it. They're saying we're able to spend this. So from current levels to option A is $97,000. From current levels to option B is $137,000. So we're not talking millions. we're talking 40,000 more than what A is. And I have spreadsheets here if anybody wants to look at them, so I'm not just talking
So
numbers.
even in option A, that'd put us $800,000 in
Out.
the negative.
Yes.
No, it would be, what,
Yes. We're
okay,
right now.
Supervisor Wilson, go ahead.
No, right now, given just the changes that we just approved, given all the road income, they're sitting at $648,990 out. So, and the only reason why that hasn't impacted the road department in the last few years is because of salary savings, unfortunately, because we've been down staff. Otherwise, this would have been more problematic than it currently is. If we make those changes, you would have to add, the 130,000 additional to the outage because they're already running in the red. My statement on this is clear. I don't support either of these two options. We did a strategy plan we put together, and in that plan, it was already detailed out that this was one of our priorities. That this was the lack of staff over there and trying to find solutions to retention within the road department was one of our priorities. Sheriff's Department was also a priority. We put together that plan. This last meeting, or 2 meetings ago, we circumvented that plan by pushing this back onto your plate and expediting it to basically a 2-meeting recovery, bringing back something that was going to address the issues based on something that was not approved of but was given by staff to board members. We have a $5 million buffer right now. Running a $800,000 deficit is going to eat that up. Plus, it won't really allow us, since we're running a deficit, a lot of material if we are fully staffed and can actually do these projects. So my issue with this decision was, one, we just authorized a comp study. We spent money putting together the strategic plan. We were now spending money on a comp study and a systems analysis so that we can see if there are ways that we can better address the needs of our budget going forward. And we just approved the money. We haven't even seen the results of that comp study. But this was pushed forward ahead of any of those information. It is unwise and to waste money for a comp study and a survey if we're not even going to wait for the results of those things to make our determinations on where we go and what our plans are going forward. It's unwise to push ourselves at a speed that doesn't afford the unions and our state to meet together to come up with the priority that we set at solving these problems of hiring and retention. We just took a step today that gives a tool for hopefully hiring. We also adjusted the wages on the bottom end of these initial hires on the road crew to hopefully get some additional personnel to apply for these jobs. There are other issues. HR needs to go much faster in their hiring process. We know that. That's been a problem, and we're looking at solutions for that. We're hiring an HR director. We are trying to hire personnel so we can get this resolved. But this all takes time, and this proposal, this determination, one, it circumvents the very important strategic plan that we put in process. It is making decisions, and we're spending money on studies that we're not even waiting for the results to come in to balance out our judgments and our determination. And it's also pushes our staff to make hasty decisions on how to resolve these problems without potentially having the time to really negotiate and with the unions to be able to come up with real solutions that we can actually afford when we are looking at currently a $648,000 deficit. So I don't support either of these two plans going forward because I don't believe in making decisions that waste money or are done in haste. And both of these determinations were pushed forward on our staff outside of the normal processes and didn't allow for the strategic plan, which prioritized this as an issue going forward, to actually work out and go through the process. So, you know, as I appreciate the work, I appreciate the time that both you and Heidi put into coming up with your recommendations. I liked a lot of what I saw in there, but there are still questions as to comp analysis and system analysis that I think would be beneficial in weighing in prior to our making our judgments, and something that's going to impact not only the road department, but all the other union workers that are going to look at this and want to see some kind of parity, rightfully so. Thank you.
So, Chair, if I could, there was a process. It started in April. And whether or not, however we're going to write the history on what went wrong here, there was a proposal made. I haven't seen the emails as to find out why it got retracted, but then it did get retracted, so I'll give you that for whatever reason, Mr. Olson's getting thrown under a pretty fast-moving bus here. But what I want to bring up is that in the June meeting, there's 12 positions that were reclassed. 12 positions. We're asking for 18 positions, or 17 actually, to be reclassed. This isn't something that is just out of the blue. We were able to figure out, staff was able to figure out 12 positions, and it came before the board. It got passed through the union. One of the young ladies spoke today about how unfair it is for us to circumvent the system. She was one of the people that benefited from one of those reclasses. So this isn't just something that we bypassed. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it didn't get through because somebody didn't stand behind their employee. So I feel as if we are in a situation where if all that we can approve today is A, then that's fine. But I think it's fair for us to point out that we can't do a one-size-fits-all in this county anymore. We have to go department by department. If the auditor and controller or admin came to us and says, we've been at a 50% vacancy rate for 2, 3, 4 years, we would try and do something to help them out. But somehow we don't apply that same thing to our roads and our sheriff. Why is that? Why can't we do that? Why can't we just look at the department? Because it's our job to make sure that we're protecting this community. It's our job to make sure that we are keeping this infrastructure going, and so it's viable. So I hear you. If we have to, and the only thing that we can get out of today is A, I'd love for us at least to see something, because it's movement in the right direction. It's this board's word that we care about the infrastructure. It's this board's commitment that we are willing to say we've got to do something differently, because we cannot let our roads become our jail.
I agree that, and that's the one thing that I think the board was unanimous, that we all recognize that, and that's why it was a priority. But when we rush and we push to make rash decisions and judgments and spend money that obviously is wasted if we're not even waiting for the information to come back to us in order to educate us and to teach us and to hopefully inform us as to what exactly is going to be beneficial when it's compared to all the other salaries and all the other positions that we are going to be looking at in our comp study.
Then we shouldn't have done it for the 12 others. That's, I guess, my point, is we allowed that to happen for 12 other positions on June 25th. We allowed that process to be. We didn't allow it for this. I mean, it's as simple as that. But with that, I'll make a motion that we approve wage adjustments for the roads division classification as recommended by the county administrative officer in attachment A. And we approve the revisions to the attached road division classification description as requested by the director of the community development department and as recommended by the county administrative officer, and that we authorize human resources, to complete all necessary administrative tasks to reflect any action taken by the board as requested by the county administrative officer.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey. I just wanted to say, this comp study that we're expecting to get in 4 to 6 months, what's it going to tell us about our road department? It's going to tell us that we're understaffed. It's going to tell us where our compensation lies as it compares to other counties, and what competition that we have to deal with the state and federal competitors. We know that, from what Jeff said a minute ago, that the job that the guys have there is a good job. We saw it from multiple comments in Facebook threads that said, I love my job there. I wish I could go back. I just needed to be paid more, so I had to go to Caltrans. So we have a great understanding that our road department is run well, but it's understaffed. I don't understand how we could come to the idea that we're rushing into something after they've been understaffed for 2, 3, 4 years. We know that pay is the issue, and we need to deal with that in a significant manner. So I don't believe that we're being hasty at all. And we need to be mindful of the investment that we've made in a large amount of equipment and the dollars that represents. Jeff could probably agree with me, I'm sure, that if you put a rookie truck driver into your trucks all the time, they're going to spend more time in the shop than they're going to spend on the road. Same goes for a grader operator. You put a rookie grader operator on, you're going to be buying tires on each side of the thing, and they're $1,000, $1,500 a piece. So having a rookie workforce is really detrimental to the roads, and not that rookies cause this to happen, but we do have 2 signs on South Fork Road representing a couple of deaths that have happened from guys in our road department. And there is an element of skill there that we need to be sure and have in our road department just to keep them safer. We have that responsibility as well. But I do appreciate what Supervisor Starkey says, that we have to protect this infrastructure. And yep, our roads have looked very good in the past, but if we keep ignoring them, they're not going to look worth driving on. We may as well just pull the pavement up and have them on gravel, because they'll go to a point where it's going to be hard to catch back up. So I do appreciate Mr. Olson coming forward with this kind of ambitious reclass. I think it's a necessary step. I regret that we can't come to a decision to implement that today, but I will make a second to Supervisor Starkey's motion.
We have we have a motion and a second. Any other comment?
I'd certainly like to say something.
Yeah.
I've listened to the discussion here today. I do think there was a lot of dangerous precedent that was at least attempted to be set at that June meeting. I think we have a process essentially in place that works well currently for the represented bargaining groups, for the county administration, and for us, and that's why we follow these procedures. We heard during general public comment today, and we also heard during this item that if we do move forward with this item for this one group, it's definitely going to reflect in the discussions going forward for all the groups. And I don't see why it wouldn't. That's the way this has always come down. And that is what I recall, at least every time we have these discussions, our CEO and our budget team reminding us of. But I also understand Supervisor Starkey. It's how do we get to a point where we find a mechanism that allows us to recruit at a higher level of pay for this department. Currently, we don't have a mechanism for doing that within our policies and procedures and how we bargain in good faith. And I'm not sure with the processes that are here in place, we're going to resolve this overnight by taking this step. Not only before we get the facts in place that allow us to take a more aggressive decision-making process on increasing those wages, which I heard very clearly from our CEO at the June 26th meeting, is getting those data points in place so the reclassifications could occur to where we could justify increased wages within these departments. Spelling those pieces out and being patient with our strategic planning process and the approval now of going out and hiring the consultant to do those studies does take time. But again, I'm not entirely sure an increased wage is going to increase the number of bodies that we have at the road department. There's private industries here currently today that have increased wages significantly by 25 to 30% and have yet to see the result of those increased wages with warm bodies. Instead, what we see when at least the public sector has done that in the past is we've seen a stealing from our current community workforce. There's no new bodies coming into our area to fill those positions. We're just, the healthcare, not the Department of Health is losing employees to the school district because the school district, through legislative action, has had increased budget specific to mental health issues. So now all our employees are shifting over there. We're not seeing a new recruitment of bodies. So I guess I'm just questioning whether or not this fix, which is being advocated for to increase wages to make it more attractive for folks to come on board, is actually going to work. And then what does that eventually put us in, which is the job of our CEO and our auditor controller to really tell us how much money we have left to spend. And that's really the bottom line. Do we want to put ourselves in a deficit spending situation? And I think Supervisor Wilson did make a good point. Wages are wages, and it begins to max out the various revenue sources that are coming into that budget to backfill that. But then what do we have left to buy the materials that are going to allow those individuals to do their job if we have nothing left? And I think that's where our strategic planning process has been effective, because we are prioritizing projects, using money out of SB1, potentially using money out of Measure R to either leverage or communally put forward a project that's going to get 1 mile or 2 miles of road completed. But doing it hastily, and I understand the reason for the haste, doing it hastily without the facts and the information in place is not a smart move. And I think that's why, at least in this case, our department head, Director Kunstl, with all her years of experience, negotiated with our budget team in good faith to put forward a proposal that looked at the here and now with the information she had in place. And that we will go into those negotiations starting next month and hopefully find, after Clint sees, not using a crystal ball, but the actual data, if we have room to bump up to that next step using the facts that we gain through that compensation analysis. Those are my thoughts, and really why I enjoyed the discussion today. I think it needs to be had. I wish there were mechanisms to step out, but there currently aren't. I think if we're going to focus time in the future, it's finding a way, working with the unions, to step out to really recognize those individuals within that bargaining.
So if I could just say a few things. We don't know if this is going to fix it. We don't know if it's going to work, but we haven't even tried. 4 years almost that I've been on this board, this has been a discussion. For 4 years, we've been given direction to the director as to the CAO to try and do something to bring forward information that's going to actually fix this. As far as, are we going to have enough money left over? Well, thank goodness that we approved a budget hearing today, Supervisor Howard, so that we're able to really dive deep into these budgets. one thing that is getting tossed around is this negative budget that this is going to impact us. It's truly not in this particular department. And then my final point is, what mechanism in place do we have to be able to not do the one size fits all? That's already in place. We just saw it on June 25th when we approved 12 positions to be reclassified, all but one of them for higher level salaries. So it's already a mechanism in place. We just chose not to use it.
Supervisor Stark, I just, not to bemoan this issue, but we have absolutely 100% tried to directly put into effect for this specific group of employees. In 2021, we made that move to increase salaries. I can't recall what it is. It was 11 or 12%.
It was 5% 2 years in a row.
And then to increase that by 9.5% close to the next year, and then in addition, the following year after that. So the 3 years, another 2.5% COLA. Neil, please help me out because my memory's foggy here. I don't believe we haven't done anything to try to compensate our road employees to make these positions more attractive. What did we do?
If you're referring to what was in my board report, in 2021, there were focused range adjustments for the road division, anywhere from 5% to 20% range adjustments. The road worker series were given 12.5%. You're alluding to the contract, which was a 9% contract, which is added to those wages outside of the focused range adjustments, and then an additional 2.5% that was given by the board to address minimum wage changes.
So one thing I do want to point out, and I understand that, but we're talking 10% on $20.55 an hour, right? That's what the amount is after all those things that Mr. Lopez just pointed out. We're not talking, if someone the higher level pay is getting 10%, if they make $86 an hour and we give them 10%, that's another $8.60 an hour. For these guys, it's another $2 an hour. I mean, it's just for the work that they do, the level of technical issues that they have to do, and then the fact that it's our role here to look at succession planning. I think that we need to be the ones doing that. So I'm hearing what you're saying. I understand that efforts have been made in the past, but to really not dive in to look at the actual structure of that department and really critically look at, is $20 enough for somebody to drive the $500,000 piece of equipment that we just approved for them to go buy? It seems really, really low to me. And I understand that there's a mechanism in the place, but why are we limiting ourselves to not really looking department by department as to what their needs are, instead of just get everybody 10% and that should solve the problem? That doesn't solve the problem.
I don't think anybody sitting up here is not advocating for a mechanism to do that, but we currently do not have one in place where that represented group can't come forward, which is their job, is to advocate exactly for what you're talking about. So we need that mechanism. We currently don't have it. I don't believe so.
Okay, then how do you justify that on June 25th, 12 positions came forward with a mechanism to reclassify certain positions within the department? If there's not a mechanism in place, tell me why that was able to happen.
That was a reclassification.
Yes.
It's different than giving across the board
No,
wages to the entire.
Sure. What we're talking about here is reclassifications.
Yes, we're talking about reclassifications in order to fix and hopefully to get more people on board. I'm not entirely sure that's the best mechanism.
One of the issues that I have is we make these decisions, we make these motions. In fact, we've just raised the bottom end positions within the road department in order to try to address the low end wage and try to pick those up. We haven't even, the ink's not even really dry on that to see if that's going to have any effect as to recruitment. Today, we just passed an issue that allows the road department to hire at above a level A in various steps. This is so that hopefully we can recruit people that have experience that aren't coming in, and we can entice them to come. So it behooves us as a county to give time to the mechanisms that we're putting in place to see if they have an effect. Are they actually doing something? Are they actually affecting the hiring and recruitment and retention, or are they not? When you make these decisions at haste and you don't even give time to see if those decisions are actually going to have an effect, then you're just shooting blind and wasting a lot of decisions that potentially, because I know we've done this in other departments, and it's helped them in their recruitment and hiring. And it will do the same thing at the road department, but we have to give it time.
Mr. Chairman, just one more question for CAO. If this item A is approved today, it increases wages for that particular department. Starting next month, negotiations are opened up for everybody. Is there a possibility then during that negotiation period, then the bargaining unit could potentially look for additional 1, 2, or 3 year contracts for another additional percentage of what we have here today?
Yes, that's one of the reasons I laid out in my report as well, is that consideration of these range adjustments, knowing that negotiation starts next month with SEIU, who represents the majority of these employees, and typically it results in a 3-year contract with wage adjustments each year. So outside of contract, with the board approving waiving 4.12 today, it's a legitimate 10% range adjustment, which is significant.
So one question, if I could then. When you go into these negotiations, in your experience, do you go department by department, or do you just give flat COLAs across the board?
Range adjustments are typically across the board for all SEIU represented employees. It's up to them if they want to approach it differently. They haven't in the past because they like the unity of their group.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion. Please pull the vote.
Supervisor Howard,
No.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
No. That brings us to the end. Sorry, folks.
Meeting adjourned.
That brings us to the end of all the items. This meeting is adjourned.